Hello, reader! This is a drama about the granddaughter of an archduke. The main character looks out the window and thinks about how long it's been. And it really has been hard, because all sorts of things have happened along the way. She even met the Demon King. At the same time, the girl had 3 older brothers who hugged her every second of every hour, and she was once again reunited with someone dear to her. The maid informs Lady Danae that the time has come. The young lady replies that she will come soon. The main character believes that this is her revenge after 500 years, and that she, despite everything, has returned. The boy, screaming, claims they're mistaken, as he's not the Demon King. The other man tells them to be careful and not let the Demon King trick them, and suggests they attack. This is a world where magic and swords exist. Asanov is the Empire's only archduchy. Their history begins with a 500-year-old legend. At that time, the Demon King declared war to occupy the rich land blessed by the gods. However, the continent suffered. All the countries of the continent combined their forces to form an allied army, but this was not enough to defeat the Demon King, and the defeat of the allied forces was certain. However, the hero then received a divine revelation from the goddess Rosiante. Thus, the archmage Pamela Asanov was born. Together with other mages, he sealed away this evil Demon King. The demons, having lost their leader, were banished to the demon world in the desert by the Misty Mountains. A massive magical barrier was erected in the Misty Mountains to prevent demons from attacking. Below, a mansion was built, boasting strict security. People called this snow-white place the Winter Mansion. Since then, the Duchy of Asanov has been commanded to defend the Winter Mansion to the last drop of blood, and Pamela's will became the family's messiah, and for 500 years he silently guarded this place. Even among small children in the Empire, the Asanov legend is famous. However, this legend contains a grave error. The being that the archmage, Pamela, destroyed was not actually the Demon King. The main character doesn't understand how she knows all this, but when she read the book, she finally understood it all, and she considers herself a victim. The Archduchy's eldest son, Lucas Asanov, approaches Danae and asks what's wrong with her. He also asks if she's in pain. She replies that everything is fine and that she has no such problems. A young gentleman greets a girl and calls her a brat, then asks if she's reading boring books again. This gentleman is the second son, the eldest of the Baratheon twins, Asanov. The third son is the younger of the Shisei twins. Asanov asks her brother why he's bothering to get the sick child, and at that moment, the girl thought about how he's merciless even to his older brother. Danae says she's fine and explains that she was simply thinking about the great history of Asanov. She suggests not to worry, as she's not in any pain. At this time, the Avenger was watching them and quietly said that they could laugh along while they could. The main character believed she was mistaken for the Demon King and died at the hands of Pamela Asanov, only to be reincarnated 500 years later. Now she is a descendant of the great hero, the granddaughter of Archduke Danae Asanov. In her past life, the main character was the apprentice of an ordinary minor mage. With one exception, she lived in a hideout among the Misty Mountains with Master Kaladirian. The young gentleman, surprised, asks who even said they were living in a shelter. Then he insists it's a quiet place with good air. She can't even imagine how lucky she is to live in such a place. The young lady approaches Master Rian and claims that all possible races and ferocious beasts live in the Misty Mountains. He says there's a saying that if someone is attached to a place, it's their homeland, and then he thinks that at some point, it seems better not to use it. The protagonist thought she had no idea what her master was thinking. Then she remembered that her master, Caladrian, was the man who raised her. On his way to the Misty Mountains, he said he found her abandoned in a slum he'd stumbled upon. She was a small child then, hungry and screaming loudly, and she cried so loudly it was almost irritating, and so he found it strange that no one had picked her up. The master says that, thanks to this, he was able to have a child without even getting married. And despite all this, he complained about it every day. The teacher taught the girl everything he knew, until he suddenly fell ill and died. She knew knowledge, fencing, and magic. The teacher was perfect in everything and very strict. Through numerous arduous training sessions and being whipped, Danae grew into a skilled mage who could also wield a sword. And from childhood, the girl was determined, and this served her well in later life. The protagonist turns to the master and says, "This is unimaginable, because even if this magic were used hundreds of years in the future, the medicine's effect would be the same." He says she's right, because any object would retain its shape and effect. The girl says with delight that the magic of preservation is very convenient. Danae says they should test it on her bag. The master agrees and says he appreciates her spirit, but suspects that, like last time, her magic might not wear off. The main character explains that she simply forgot the spell to dispel the magic. He asks how about Togo casting a spell in his name? The girl is surprised to hear this. The master explains that there's power in a name, because she'll never forget it. The spell will be more effective. He then suggests she try it just once. Danae thought the master was a wonderful man, and she thought of him as a parent. She couldn't understand why he wanted to live in such a place, since his house was in the woods and there were no neighbors around, so she thought he might be a hardened criminal. The girl believes that even if this is true, she doesn't care, because for her, he is the only person in this world that matters to her. When the girl was little, she remembered how they went fishing, and she also remembered how they caught a big fish, and at night, he read her stories. And then, with the memory of the master in her heart, she thought of living quietly in this forest. However, one day, a commotion began in the Misty Mountains, because many chatty fairies live in these misty mountains. The fairies are talking among themselves about rumors that a ship full of treasure, which recently sank during a storm, was called the Celestial Ship. They are also curious about what happened to the people on that ship. The main character overheard their conversation and thought that if she got her hands on those treasures, she could spend her entire life eating and doing nothing. However, she doesn't understand why, if that's true, they always come to her to gossip. Danae thinks that maybe the fairies like her, and that's why they're always chatting around her. She reflects on how there are so many things they know and chat about, and even if they make a fuss, they never lie. And she believes there's a lot of useful information there. The main character asks the fairies if the Misty Mountains have been in disarray lately. The fairy in the yellow dress asks if she knew. Then she tells her that they say the Demon King has made this place the base of his war of conquest. And day after day, he's winning victories and throwing parties like crazy. I heard that this girl understood what was going on and thinks that everything will calm down soon. However, the demon parties continued every evening, and after a month, the protagonist realizes she's utterly exhausted from the lack of sleep. And with all this noise, she believes she can't stand it anymore. Diana opens the door and, screaming, insists she won't let this go. Then she turns to the Demon King and tells him to come out now. The demon asks who she is. The girl replies that she's a simple person and that her life is unbearable because of his noisy daily parties. The main character asks if he'll keep it down or move his base elsewhere. Hearing this, the demon is surprised and then says it's funny. The red-haired demon asks what kind of person is attacking the Demon King. At this time, the girl thought about what she knew, because words did not work, and she understands that at best she did not want to fight, but there is nothing she can do, and therefore she will have to. The young lady believes she wasn't just training to kill time. Then, using magic and a few techniques, she quickly knocked the savage to the floor. He was surprised and asked why she was so strong. Seeing this, Danae was surprised. She couldn't believe it, since she had never won against the master. And at that moment, she thought about how the master was the strongest in the entire universe. The demon angrily says that she is the first person to defeat him, and then he kneels before her and says that therefore today, she will be their king. Hearing this, the heroine was surprised, and from that moment on, the original Demon King and his subordinates followed her. The young lady asks how long they plan to follow her. Then she claims she said many times she won't be the Demon King. The red-eyed boy says she's got the better of him. Hearing this, the girl says she'll give in to him, and he'll hit her, and then it will be like he's won. Then she asks if that's okay with him. The guy heard this and said he didn't dare attack the Demon King. The girl, screaming, asked me if he was tired of repeating the same thing. And at that moment, she thought he was annoying her. At this time, they were being watched from afar, and so she met her death, having been mistaken for the Demon King. She tells them to wait, as she will surely return and take revenge on him, because she believes she cannot fall into eternal slumber because of such injustice. Danae doesn't understand what it is, and feels like water is pressing on her body. She wonders if she will definitely die. She also assumes that she will definitely survive. A few weeks ago, she woke up in a luxurious room and heard people's voices. Danae thought it must be one of Asinov's relatives. Baratheon asked how disappointed they were, since they probably thought that if the Archduke died, they would be able to absorb the family. He realized that, although it was late, the Archduke's granddaughter had appeared as an heir. The younger twin says they'll find out everything once they interrogate that bastard they caught. Then he explains, That's why they didn't kill him, but brought him here. His brother says he will interrogate him, and if he is a mage, he believes he is the only one who can resist him. At this point, the main character was surprised, as she felt like the Archduke's granddaughter. And then she heard about Asenov. She also wondered if this wasn't the same Asenov who had killed her, something she couldn't quite comprehend. The young lady thought that her body was like a wet rag, and she couldn't even open her eyes normally. The girl turns around in bed, and the young men see her, screaming and calling her name. They ask in surprise if she's come to her senses. The protagonist opened her eyes and saw their surprised faces. And at that moment, she didn't understand what she should tell them. Lucas asks what's wrong with her, and also asks if she has a headache. And his brother, groaning, says that the bastard turned out to be a charlatan. At this point, Denai doesn't understand who these laxative-looking, handsome men are. The guy asks if they shouldn't call that charlatan again, because, looking at the girl, he thinks her face is quite pale. The young lady looks at the guys and asks who they all are. And at that moment, she thought that she couldn't ask any other way. The dark-haired guy apologizes and then says they need to start with introductions. He then says his name is Lucas, and it's nice to meet her. The blonde-haired guy says he is Baratheon, and next to him is his twin brother, Shisei. The older gentleman informs her that they are all her brothers. Hearing this, the girl is surprised and smiles. And at this moment, she doesn't understand how this could have happened. The protagonist believes she needs to get her memories in order. Then she remembers that in this life, she was born into an ordinary family and lost her parents early in life. A married couple who ran a small inn in the village adopted her. The man who adopted the girl turned out to be very rude. He kept insisting that she couldn't open her eyes wide enough and couldn't even clean properly, yet she was always begging for food. He thought it was a waste of food for a lazy woman like her. The man says that he doesn't understand how someone with such an eye color could have come to be able to do this, and where a girl with such a similar and impudent look could have come from. The main character understood that in words she was a daughter, but in reality, she was no different from a slave. The girl recalls that her father often beat her. She was little and couldn't even defend herself, and she often got into trouble. Her sister, who lived with her, comes to Danae and asks if she's heard that the magical barrier of the Misty Mountains has been weakened. Then she smiles and says she's pleased to hear it. Father says that if the number of mercenaries and mages tasked with pacifying the emerging monsters increases, their inn will be overflowing with guests. And even the Asenov Knights say defeating the demons won't be easy. The girl asks her sister what is on her face, and then suggests that she quickly go wash her face. At this point, Danae thought about how she knew she couldn't even take a bath whenever she wanted, and she was deliberately saying so. The girl in the red dress said her clothes were very shabby, and therefore considered her a poor thing. The young lady offers Danae the clothes that she can no longer wear. Suddenly, the main character felt a shock and pain, causing her to fall to the floor. The man asks why she's standing there like a statue and if she'll be able to finish today. Her mother says she's completely useless because they're caring for an orphan who lost her parents to monsters, and she doesn't even know what gratitude is. She suggests that maybe she'll repay this favor to the enemy later. In the evening, Danae looked at the clothes that her sister had given her and thought that she would have to wear them again. The main character realizes that she is 13, and the clothes of her younger sister, who is 3 years younger, hang loosely. When the girl looked at the shoes, she thought that they didn't even have insoles and they looked very shabby. The young lady reflects that she has the same violet eyes as her father, and so she was despised for being different. And even if she ate, it was only the scraps that the visitors didn't eat, and she slept in a small barn next to the stables. Because of this, the girl's body was permeated with the smell of horse manure. Every night, she dreamed that her parents had come to pick her up and that she would always be with her mom and dad. Danae knows that her parents, who died protecting her from a monster, are her father's name, Linte, and her mother's, Carly. The girl reflected on the fact that if she followed her parents in a dream, they would smile broadly, hug her, and welcome their daughter. And so she was very happy in the dream, and she also dreamed that this would become reality. However, the reality was cruel, and she missed her dead parents every day, spending years in tears. Everyday life, which was so painful and difficult, suddenly changed 180 degrees with the appearance of the night. A bright-haired boy asks a girl named Danae if her name is. Hearing this, she thinks it might be a dream, since he's so blinding she can't even see him clearly. The main character realizes that a knight has appeared among the inn's guests for the first time. Then she says that he spoke her name correctly. The girl asks if he has any business with her, and then she looks at the guy and thinks about how clean his face is and how neat his clothes are. And compared to him, she feels different. At this point, the innkeeper approaches them and asks if the knight has come after hearing rumors about Danae. He says he can't even believe that a nobleman would come here for such a child. At this point, the girl realized that the smell wouldn't go away, as she realized her clothes were never washed. And even if they were, she'd have to walk around naked because she had nothing to wear. The man says that from what he sees, they're ashamed to show her anywhere because she has a short skirt and holes in her shoes, and on top of that, an unpleasant eye color. He thinks she has the kind of eyes that everyone hates. At that moment, the girl thought about how things would be better if this short skirt were longer and covered her dirty shoes. And she thought about how she didn't think there would be that fairy tale where anything magically happens. The knight says that these violet eyes are a distinguishing mark. The main character heard this and was surprised, as no one had ever told her that before. The knight says that Danae Asanoff is the granddaughter of His Excellency Archduke Asanoff. The young gentleman insists this place is not at all suitable for her. He then reports that he has received orders from Archduke Asanoff and has come to free Lady Danae. The knight says that the young lady is a very special person, and then claims that she will soon understand it. Hearing this, the man cries out and asks who said he could take Danae. He then grabs the girl and claims that she is his daughter, and therefore he cannot take her without his permission. The father turns to the girl and tells her to say that she doesn't intend to leave. Then he quietly says that she must say it, or else she'll be beaten again. The knight, hearing this, asked in surprise if they had really been to the mistress. The man looked at his cruel gaze and objected, saying that this had not happened. At this time, the little girl was surprised because she thought that he seemed to have good hearing. The father claims that he heard him wrong, and then claims that he became her father. He could not dare to hit her. However, the knight didn't believe his words and pushed him so hard that a crack appeared in the wall. Seeing this, the main character realized he had driven it into the wall. The young gentleman turns to the lady and asks her to tell him where the man hit her. She says her legs, back, and head. Hearing this, the knight gave free rein to his strength. He probably took revenge for all the humiliation and pain that the girl felt. The knight beat his father in exactly the same way she had indicated. He only asked for help and for him to stop beating him. Heard his scream. The girl remembered how she asked him to stop and not hit her anymore. Danae thought that if anyone saw this, they would think that he was paying back many times over for beating her up until now. Ritzer. He turns to the girl and asks her to go. Hearing this, she doesn't even think twice and agrees. And at that moment, she doesn't understand how this even happened. The young gentleman turned to the girl and asked if the breeze was refreshing today. He spoke so sweetly that the main character even wondered if he was the same man who had recently beaten her adoptive father like a piece of shit. Danae thought she was confused, and when she looked at the sky, she thought it was so beautiful, and it seemed to her like this was the first time since her parents died. Thus, the main character escaped the clutches of her adoptive parents. She had no idea what lay ahead, but she believed it would be better. But suddenly, bandits attacked them on the way. At that moment, the young lady became very frightened. The knight said that the attack was continuing from the west. When the fight began, the horses were very scared and ran quickly. At that moment, the carriage door opened and a girl fell out of it. Prama Vodu! Seeing the girl drowning, the knight screams and shouts, but can't do anything. At this time, the main character doesn't understand why there are no peaceful days in her life. Then, opening her eyes, she finds herself in this place. Because of this, falling into the water, memories from her past life flooded back. Danae doesn't understand why she's suddenly overcome with anger. She remembers that in a past life, she was mistaken for the Demon King and died at the hands of Pamela Asanoff. The young lady remembers that she didn't have many things she wanted to do. She believes he stole her precious future, and to make it disappear, she must take revenge. The girl thought this was the perfect setting for revenge, as she would realize that everything from her past life remained in her head, and with the help of her tenacity and the magical knowledge she received from Master Rian, she would destroy Pamela Asanoff. The main character became curious about her name in this life, which is the same as her previous one. She understands that this is surprising, but she believes there's power in a name. Danae assumes this is a reward for her foolish death. She believes God took pity on her and gave her another chance to live as Danae. And then her free interpretation skill was activated. Baratheon asks his brother why he didn't let him introduce himself. At that moment, the little girl looked at him and thought how enormous he was. And then she remembers that he resembled a bear she accidentally encountered in the forest. The boy says his name is Baratheon and he's very happy to meet her. Shisei flicks his brother's forehead, tells him he's stupid, and tells the little girl to ignore him. The girl looked at them and thought that they really were twins. Lucas says she can call them brothers, but they're not biological since they were all adopted. Shisei explains that the old man gathered them all. Hearing this, the girl is surprised. Baratheon explains that he means Archduke Asenov, her grandfather. The main character asks if she has a grandfather, and then says that she heard something like that at the hotel, and wonders if she is really Asenov's granddaughter. Brother says it must be so, and then asks, since with that eye color, other proof is needed. And he says something has been bothering him lately. Baratheon lifted the girl into his arms and asked how he had done it, as he hadn't thought she was so light. He then said she was too thin and thought it was the shameless Asenov. At that moment, the girl thought about how she'd like to be adopted, but her brother said it was an elite breed, and she was like an abandoned puppy. Hearing this, the main character couldn't understand why such an analogy was used. The boy tells the girl that before the old man returns from the capital, she needs to show her best side. And then she says that if things don't go well, he might mistakenly think they were abusing the child. Shisei says that even though he's stupid, he'll agree with him this time. Hearing this, Baratheon screams and tells him to speak normally. At this time, Danaya does not understand how to show herself from a good side, since she does not know what it means. Shisei turns to the little girl and tells her to rejoice, because they will show her what her true origins are. The main character heard this and didn't understand what they were going to do with her. And since they said they would show her, she followed them. The girl saw a luxurious room, and her brother said that this was her room and that she was now the mistress there. The little girl asks in surprise if this is really her room. Her brother, in response, asks if she still doubts it. She says she should admit it, because what's more important is that she looks so much like the old man. He says he heard Hedin recognize her the moment he saw her. The man confirmed his words, addressing her as Mistress Danae. At this point, the protagonist thought she'd heard that voice somewhere before, and when the girl remembered, she screamed and asked if he was the one who was at the hotel last time. The knight turns to the girl and says that they have met again. Lucas asks the little girl if she already knows Hedin. Then he tells her he's been assigned to guard her. Seeing her surprise, he says there's no harm in being on guard. The brother introduces his personal maid Marina, who will be responsible for her until that day. Luxurious furniture and works of art filled the mansion. An accompanying knight and even an elegant maid accompanied her, and yet the girl felt as if she were in a dream. Marina turns to her mistress and suggests that she go. Hearing this, the little girl doesn't understand where she's supposed to go and asks about it. A few minutes later, the maid was already washing the girl and asked if it was too hot. Danae insisted that everything was fine. And then she thought about how pleasant it felt to have her skin washed, since this was her first time in a rose bath. The main character thought that taking a bath was bliss. After her bath, the girl tried on the dress for the first time in her life. Marina looked at her and said she knew it would fit, as the clothes were too big. However, the knight insisted the clothes were actually tailored to the lady's age. At this time, the main character thought that she simply could not eat properly while living in a hotel, and believed that she must be smaller than her peers. Danaya considers it a great blessing that she was finally able to try on such beautiful clothes. The little girl says she really likes it and that the fabric doesn't rub her skin. She thinks it's her personal dress, the one she's always dreamed of. It also smells great, and her hair is fine and soft. The girl felt Marina stroking her head and slowly drifting off to sleep. Suddenly, Danae remembers that she's completely forgotten her purpose. She realizes he's mistakenly killed a completely innocent man and yet lives in such undeserved luxury. The little girl ponders what's more important. Since she's the granddaughter of Archduke Asenov, that means she's a descendant of Archmage Pamela, and it turns out he's no longer in this world. And she doesn't understand how she can take revenge then. Danae reflected on the fact that there was one more thing she had realized, and the magical knowledge in her head was still the same as in her past life, but the mana needed to use magic was gone. The girl doesn't understand how to get it, and believes she'll do everything possible to get her magic back. And if you think about it, the situation isn't so bad. The little girl is thinking about the fact that starting tomorrow, she'll need to come up with a new plan for revenge. But to do that, she just needs to run into this fucking bastard's family. The maid asks the young lady if she'd like to tour the mansion. She then tells Predlagayat the girl to wait a bit, and a few minutes later, she returns with a basket. The little girl asks in surprise what it is. Marina replies that it's black tea and sweets. Then she explains that while they're out walking, they might get hungry. The maid announced that she'd packed a pile of chocolate and cookies, which the mistress liked. Hearing this, the girl thought Marina had taken care of everything. Denai thanks Marina, and Hedin says he'll carry the basket. At that moment, the girl felt wonderful, as no one had ever cared for her like this before. The main character thought that it might look like a leisurely stroll, but her real goal was to explore enemy territory. And at this time, she thinks that she has changed her strategy. And if she cannot kill Pamela with her own hands, then all she needs to do is destroy the Asanov family, which enjoys wealth and fame. The little girl believes that by pretending to be a good child, she's earning favor. And like clothes getting wet in the drizzling rain, she's slowly ruining the Asanov family. Caladrian had once said that the way to defeat an opponent was very simple. She needed to conceal her aim and abilities, and then manage to catch the enemy off guard. The master said that the first thing you need to do is to find out everything about the enemy and the terrain. And so the protagonist believes she'll first deal with the Asanov mansion and ensure no one discovers her dark intentions. To do this, she feigns innocence to deceive them. The knight gives the cats to the girl and says it's good they brought sweets with them. At this point, she thinks this is the best examination. Then she suggests the knight go the other way. Suddenly, the girl heard a question. Why is she wearing such a funny outfit? She saw that it was the younger twin. Shisei is curious about why she's walking around like this. He also wonders what happened to the clothes they prepared for her. Denai explains that these are the very clothes. He asks if she's 13 years old. She replies that she is, but she's just a little small. At this point, the protagonist thought that he had a handsome face, but at the same time, his words were very repulsive, and she realized that this man was speaking disdainfully. The girl believes that, in terms of appearance, Shisei is definitely a dazzling picture, and the clothes he's wearing seem tailored for him and suit him perfectly. The little girl realizes that her clothes actually look much bigger compared to his, but she doesn't think it's all that funny. Denaya says no one told her she looks strange. The guy says it's natural, and then asks who in this house could tell her that, other than him. Shisei asks what she ate to look like such a straw doll. At this point, the protagonist doesn't understand why he's looking at her like that and thinks he's crossing a line. The girl asks, what does it matter that she is smaller than her peers, and that it would be much better if the sleeves were shorter? The guy looked at the girl's hand and said that now he understands, because there was a reason why that idiot made a fuss about it being so light, and then he lifts the girl into his arms. Denai screamed, asking what he was doing, and at that moment, she thought about how this man possessed amazing magical powers. She thought him fragile, but despite his appearance, he was very strong. Shisei says that even he has enough strength to raise a child like her. The little girl asks if she told him anything. The guy replies that maybe it was her eyes. The girl, surprised, asks where he's going. Shisei replies that she'll see when they arrive. However, she screams for him to let her go. The main character doesn't understand what he's staring at so intently and why he made her sit next to him. The little girl realizes she felt this magic not long ago, and she truly doesn't know who he is and considers him her #1 concern. Denai doesn't understand what kind of room this is, since it's almost bare, and she doesn't understand why he brought her here at all. And he's still sitting there, staring. The girl takes a cookie, then eats a few and thinks that eating alone isn't really her thing. She thinks she'll be a good child if she shares the cookies. The main character asks Shisei if he wants to eat at this time, thinking that she could offer him those almond cookies that she doesn't like. The guy says he doesn't need them because he won't have any, but the little girl insists they're delicious. Hedin is watching them from the front row. You suggest that little one eat more. She says there are so many of them. Shisei explains that's why he tells her to eat everything herself. The girl agrees, and then she thinks she's sorry, because this was a perfect opportunity to get rid of the one she doesn't like. Denaya thought about telling the cooks next time not to make macaroons. Lost in her thoughts, the little girl felt someone sigh, and then she saw a boy eating a cookie from her hand. Shisa tells him he's eaten and asks if she's satisfied now. At that moment, she thinks the handsome face has approached too quickly, and she freezes for a moment. The guy says she should eat the rest herself because he's worried she's too thin. Hearing this, the girl starts coughing. The young gentleman asks Hedin why he's standing there. The knight replies that he'll open it right away, then opens the door and shows the wardrobe to the young lady. The girl saw beautiful dresses and many other outfits, as well as shoes in her size. She asked in surprise what they were. Shisei takes a handkerchief and says she should wipe the cookie crumbs from the corners of her mouth. Then she says that if anyone sees, she'll be embarrassed. The young master looked at the servants, who were looking at him in surprise. He asked why they were looking at him and if they had any work to do. Hearing this, the servants quickly ran away, and one maid says that they are working. A boy tells a girl to go to a certain place and change her clothes. Hearing this, the girl doesn't understand what he's talking about and asks why she needs to change her clothes. The young gentleman explains that his little sister is wearing clothes that are the wrong size and then asks if he should look at it. Hearing this, Danae thought it was a rather eccentric reason. She then reflected that this was just his personality, and so she should accept him as he was. Shisei turns to the maid and says she's in charge of fittings and suggests trying on clothes the child would like. The maid says she'll do everything to the best of her ability, and the girl, crying out, suggests they wait. The boy asks why, surprised. The little girl wonders if they'll be finished by lunch. Then she explains that she wants to get back to her room as quickly as possible to finish her book. And then she realizes that she really wants to plot revenge. Her brother suggests she read at night since she has a lot to do during the day. He tells her he'll order at least 50 dresses today and suggests they finish when evening comes. The young gentleman says they're already getting started. The girl says she obeys him, and then she thinks she needs to behave well so he won't suspect her of anything. The maid turns to young Master Shisei and says that the fitting is complete. The little girl comes out in a new dress and asks him if he likes it. He replies that it's fine, but more importantly, she should like it herself. And then he asks her if she likes this dress. Danae replies that the dress suits her. The young gentleman suggests the seller add the item to his shopping list, and then the little girl tries on outfit number 2. The young gentleman sees her and says it suits her very well. The salesperson says he'll add it to her shopping list right away. And when the main character tried on outfit number 3, Shisei informed her that the waist needed to be tightened. The maid said she'd get to it right away. The girl tried on her 4th outfit, and then she felt a tremendous weight on her head. The young gentleman said it was too much, and that's why it turned into a nightmare, and he wouldn't read it. Danae tried on so many dresses that day that she was exhausted. She counted them and realized she had finally found her 30th. The main character understands that she liked it at first sight and believes that this is the very high fashion that she dreamed of. The little girl saw sweets in the picture and thought that she wanted to rest and eat as many of them as possible. The man invites the young gentleman to check if everything is comfortable. He asks if it's worth it. Then he turns to the little girl and invites her to walk to one chair. Hearing this, the main character thought she was some kind of dog. Then, as she quickly starts walking, she suddenly steps on his dress, tripping him and falling. The maid, surprised, asks if her mistress is okay and not hurt. Shisei suggests shortening the hem of her skirt and checking her shoes. At this time, Danae thought that what she wanted most right now was a break. The young lady was tired, sat down on a chair and thought that it was finally over. And this was what she had been dreaming about all day today. Shisei is lost in thought, then asks if he should have ordered the last yellow dress he saw. Upon hearing this, the girl doesn't understand what he said. The boy asks the little girl why she's making such a surprised face. Then he tells her he liked what she was wearing earlier. The young gentleman announced that the costume designers hadn't yet left the mansion, and so he had to tell them. Hearing this, the girl thought about what she didn't want him to tell them. Danae calculated that in one day she tried on more than 60 dresses. The girl thinks it's even for the best, since she's having a lot of fun spending money this way, because it's just another way to destroy this family. The main character believes that those who spend money spend it in large quantities, and she, in order to destroy, didn't even cause any losses. Hedon asks the lady if she did a good job, and asks if she's looking forward to seeing all the beautiful dresses completed. The girl replies that she is, of course, waiting, and then asks if 60 is not too much. The guard explains that Mr. Shisei has finished here, and reports that if it were His Excellency, the Archduke would have ordered more than 100 pieces. Hearing this, Danae was surprised and thought she'd known it all along, as this was no easy opponent, and she believed him to be as ruthless as Archmage Pamela, who had killed her. Hedin looked at the girl and asked if she was in any pain. She replied that she was worried that she hadn't yet met the Archduke. He said there was no need to worry, as the Archduke had a special affection for his blood relatives. The guard reports that he heard the gentleman cared deeply for his son, Lord Lint. He says he doesn't know the details, but there's one thing he knows for sure. Hedin says His Excellency didn't expel Mr. Linte on purpose. He always missed his family. He also wandered everywhere in search of Mrs. Danae. The girl asks when the Archduke will return. He replies that the gentleman will return within a week, and he has been informed that he is already on his way home. Danae thought that 1 week was not so long, and she began to wonder what kind of person he was. The main character reflects on the fact that today is the 6th day since he ordered so many dresses and believes that Shisei Asanov is a terrible guy. And when I looked at all these things, I was convinced of this once again. The maid looked at the little girl and said the outfit suited her very well. The girl wondered what kind of magic he had used. She realized that not much time had passed, and not all the dresses her brother had ordered were ready. Danae realizes how incredible the Asanov family is. Baratheon opens the door and asks if she's still there. The maid asks if he's forgotten that this is Lady Danae's room. He replies that he understands, then explains that he can knock before entering next time. Hearing this, the main character thought that next time it was obvious that he would open the door without a word, since she was reading that she already knew him. The guy says he heard that the guy ordered a dress. Then he asks if it's true, and when he sees all the boxes, he says in surprise that she's dressed from head to toe. The girl shows off her new dress and asks if it is really beautiful. When the main character didn't hear an answer, she thought maybe it wasn't right for her, and she believes the most important thing is that she likes it. Danae says that even if Theon says that it doesn't suit her, she doesn't care. Then she says that she really likes it and asks if that's not enough. Hearing this, the boy, surprised, asks who told her it doesn't suit her. He picks up the little lady and, with a cry, says it suits her, even very well, and she's beautiful in it. Danae asks why he was so dissatisfied then. The young gentleman explains that he simply didn't buy the dress. The girl asks if it's that important. He replies that it is very important to him. Baratheon says that, on second thought, it suits her very well, which infuriates him even more. He believes that the child has outdone him, and he can't stand that. Hearing this, the protagonist thought that he had grown physically, but he was still a child, since he spoke like that, and she realized that even if it was for revenge, it would be better to appease him first. The little girl strokes the boy's head and tells him to calm down. Then she says she thought Theon seemed the best and strongest of the three. Then she asks if that's true. Baratheon heard this and was overjoyed, assuring the girl that it was true. She said it was amazing because he was so cool. The guy asks if it's true. He says he's not that amazing, but if she says so, he'll believe it. At this point, the main character realized that he really was like a single-celled organism, and she believed that he was simple and easy to use. Suddenly, Brother Lucas comes into the room and asks what they are doing. Theon asks him how he could enter the ladies' room without knocking. Hearing this, the little girl thought that he would have been more careful. Marina says Mr. Lucas knocked and then entered. She asks if he had prepared it. The young gentleman replies that he had prepared it and that's why he came. Theon, exclaiming joyfully, said that this was excellent and offered to go. It was the girl who had become curious about where to go and was asking about it. The young gentleman explains that they are going to the rose garden because the flowers are in full bloom now. He suggests they have a light picnic there. Lucas shows the girl a whole basket full of groceries and asks if he should prepare more. She replies that this is enough. The dark-haired man says that if anyone doesn't have enough, he offers to make more, and he knows that if it's for Danae, everyone will be happy to cook. At this point, the main character thought that Lucas Asanov was the kindest guy, beautiful as a flower. At the same time, she thought he seemed cautious and thoughtful. Danae believes that, like the #1 Shisei to be wary of, he is clearly someone she should be on her guard around. The little girl asks if they'll go just the three of them. Shisei thinks for a moment, then explains that the boy is busy. Hearing this, the main character thinks it's awkward to go without anyone. Even if she thinks about it, she believes good kids don't abandon their friends. Lucas asks if they're ready to go yet. The little lady asks if they should go now. He replies that if they don't hurry, all the roses will wilt. She says flowers can't move that fast, like owls. The main character doesn't understand why she feels delight when she sees such beautiful flowers, and she thinks it's all because of these flowers, which are so beautiful. Theon insists it's just a plant and asks what's so beautiful about them. The girl replies that he has no sense of beauty. Lucas calls and says that everything is ready and suggests that they quickly come to him. Danae asks if she can ask something. Then she inquires as to how they were installed in the Archduchy. The blonde guy asks why she's suddenly asking about this. The girl explains that she's just curious. She asks if this is something she shouldn't ask about. Lucas objects and says that's not the point, then says that she's the first one to ask about it. Theon says the story of how they were discovered is so well known that everyone knows about it. Lucas says there's not a single nobleman who doesn't know about it. He says they were stopped 10 years ago. He was 10 years old and Theon and Shies were 8. The guy says that about 15 years ago, the magical barrier of the Misty Mountains weakened, and at the same time, problems began. Because of this, demons appeared in the northern part of the continent and several villages were devastated. The village where he lived was one of them, and he miraculously survived and ended up in an orphanage. Danae asks if there weren't many other children in the orphanage, and she wonders why the Archduke chose Lucas. Lucas wanted to explain, but Baratheon, crying out, said it was because of his abilities. Then he explained that he had extraordinary abilities and rumors had spread about him, and the old man who had heard them adopted Lucas. The black-haired boy turns to his brother and looks at him with a displeased expression. Theon asks what's wrong, as he thinks Danae will find out about it anyway. The boy says Brother Lucas is a genius who, once seen, will never forget. He explains that he could memorize such a thick book in one sitting. Hearing this, the girl, surprised, asks for every page without exception. Lucas says that Theon himself is a sword master. Danae screamed, asking if Baratheon was a master swordsman. The fair-haired man looked at the girl and asked what had suddenly happened to her. The main character, O, explains that it is because he is said to be a sword master, which means that he is the strongest swordsman who fights by pouring all his aura into the sword. Theon says there may be other sword masters. Hearing this, the girl thought it impossible. She recalls how in a past life she shed tears before Master Rian, and how she struggled to master her skills. The master said she should straighten her back more because her aura is weak, and that way she won't be able to concentrate. He also believes she's completely lacking in training and has a long way to go. And so the main character was surprised that Baratheon had such a skill, and she thought she'd always thought of him as a strong but loud idiot. Theon looked at the girl and asked what had happened to her. He then claimed he didn't know what had happened, but asked her to calm down. Watching them, Lucas thought they were having fun too. He wondered if the picnic had had any effect on them. The guy says he's still just as stupid, and yet he's her friend. The girl asks if that means she's stupid. He explains that's not what he meant. She said join them. Danae asked what happened, as he looked so tired. The guy replies that it's nothing special. Then he says that what's more important is what she wanted to say, and he asks what interests her. The little girl says she's curious about something and asks why the Archduke installed Shisei. Instead of responding, the boy used magic to shower the girl with roses, and at that moment, she thought about how he could use magic without casting a spell. Moreover, given the magical power she sensed, it was downright impossible. The girl, screaming, insists that he can't be an ordinary person. He says he knows perfectly well what she's thinking. Theon says that, in any case, this boy also received the title of Sage, which means he's a high-level mage. He even graduated from the magic tower with good grades. Upon hearing this, the main character was surprised that he could use magic like that and thought his magical skills or knowledge were inferior to hers, and she couldn't understand why the magical barrier had weakened. Lucas asks Shisei how it went. However, he doesn't respond, and the little girl asks what happened. The young gentleman replies that the little ones don't need to know. Danae, screaming, says he's treating her like a child, and she wants to know, too. Shisei touches the girl's forehead and says that in the Empire, 18 is considered an adult. Therefore, he considers her a child in any case. The young lady says he's overreacting, since he himself said they were comrades. The guy says that if she's upset, maybe she should grow up faster. Hearing this, the main character thinks they're ugly twins, and only in situations like these do they share a commonality. Danae turns to Lucas, and the brother says that the little lady came here to eat cookies. The little girl looked at the guys who were standing a little distance away from her and whispering something, and she wondered what their business was, since they were keeping it a secret from her. Hedin turns to the young master and mistress and informs them that word has reached them that the Archduke will arrive soon. Shisei says it's faster than he thought. The guard says he thinks he returned sooner than expected because he heard the news. Theon asks his brother how he likes the girl. He says she looks much better since she came here. His brother agrees and says the girl has quite good figures. At this point, the maid, screaming, says there's not much time until arrival. Then she suggests leaving the linen with the maid, as she can deal with it later. She tells everyone to hurry up and take their seats. Danae looks at this whole situation in surprise and does not understand that this is happening at all. Marina tells the lady that she shouldn't hide like that. She insists that the dress Mr. Shisei bought her suits her very well, and she thinks the little lady looks truly beautiful. The young lady recalled Hayden saying The Archduke had a particular sense of family, and she believed she had found a dress that suited her figure perfectly. The main character believes she can walk boldly right now, her chest outstretched, and at that moment, she thinks she's not in the least bit frightened and isn't afraid of the Archduke. Danae thought about this problem, because despite being determined, she was very nervous. Then she grabbed Lucas and invited him to come with her. The little girl keeps hiding behind Lucas, believing that this way she won't be noticed. She sees all the maids and servants standing waiting for the master and thinks that he is definitely a scary man. The main character thinks that this is already spilled water, but does not understand what will happen if he gets angry and asks why they bought 60 dresses. Lucas informs the girl that the Archduke has already arrived, and then he greets His Excellency. Shisei turns to the master and says he's glad he's back. His brother says that, thank goodness, he looks unharmed. When the main character saw the stranger, she wondered if he was Pamela's descendant. She saw that he had violet eyes and looked very much like his father. Asenov turns to the girl and asks if she is Dana. The young lady replies that she is. A few minutes later, the girl doesn't understand all of this. And at that moment, she thought about how he was still looking for her, not to mention a tearful reunion, but his reaction was so cold. The Archduke asks the little girl what she likes. The girl doesn't understand what he's talking about, and the young gentleman explains that he's talking about food. Denaya says she likes meat and chocolate chip cookies. Asenov says that'll be on the menu then. Then he offers to prepare everything so they can have lunch. The servant says he will do everything as ordered, and then asks if His Excellency had a good trip. Little girl asks Lucas if the Duke has invited her to dinner. He replies that she understood correctly. The main character doesn't understand whether she should eat alone with that man. She also wonders if everything will be okay with her. After some time, a cheerful meal with the Archduke began, and the girl recalls that when she heard her grandfather was looking for her, she thought it would be like this. She reflects on the fact that he looks a little younger than she expected. More importantly, he doesn't look like Pamela. Denaya believes that if it were the other way around, she would be furious, not to mention the touching reunion. Sitting at the table, she wonders if it's too quiet. The girl reflects on how, at first, he said nothing, doing nothing but eating, and she thinks the sound of the knife and fork is very loud. She wonders if he invited her to dine together. Together literally meant just sitting and eating. The main character thought this would drive her crazy, and she believes that's why she should be the one to open her mouth. Denai asks the Lord why he suddenly decided to find her. Then she explains that he hadn't even looked for his father, and hadn't looked for her either, for 13 years. At this time, the girl thought that she herself had told him everything so bluntly, and did not understand why even his facial expression had not changed. The Archduke replies, "It's not that he didn't look, but that he simply couldn't find it." And then it's revealed that her father, Linte, didn't want it. Grandfather recalls that at 18 years old, on the day of his coming of age, Linte wanted only one gift. The Archduke says he's having his coming of age ceremony, and he can wish for whatever he wants. Hearing this, the boy asks whatever he wants, and the father replies, yes. The son, surprised, asks if this is a joke. Then he explains that he needs a country and wants to experience the world outside. Linte asked his father to give him freedom. The Archduke reported that his son had decided to live not as the heir to the Archduchy, but as a free man in the outside world. And after that, he never looked for the child again. Hearing this, the main character thought that this was the level of her son's idiocy. And if you think about it rationally, when a son says something like that, the person who replaces him can't possibly speak like that in their right mind. And she thinks a normal father would have yelled at her if he'd heard this. Denaya looked at the gentleman and thought that he only seemed cold on the outside. Grandfather says a year ago, a traveling mercenary brought a letter. He explained that Linte had asked him to do so. And in the part about the demon attack, he sensed that this was the last letter left by his son, because most of the letter was written poorly, and it talked about Danaeus. The mercenary who brought the letter apologized for delivering it so late. He said he was delayed because he encountered a demon along the way and contracted the plague. Grandfather says that as soon as he received the letter, he went to the village where she lived, but he couldn't find her there. And since then, he's come a long way. And if these were just rumors, he's visited every place. However, they were able to find Danae in one of the inns. Grandfather asks if she also wants freedom. Hearing this, the main character thought that the very thought of it gave her goosebumps. She had spent hellish days with her adoptive parents, who were like monsters. The girl realizes that she has only one answer, and then asks if the Archduke knows how she lived. Danae says she has no desire to return to the outside world. The gentleman says he forgot to tell her something important, and then suggests she call him her grandfather. Meanwhile, in the demon world, Mr. Ballange asks the monster how the search went and whether they found him. He replies that he thinks they finally found him. Hearing this, the master, screaming, said that finally the Demon King Danae opened her eyes. However, the demon says they have a problem. He then reports that the Demon King's energy is being felt in the Winter Mansion. Hearing this, the master asks what kind of nonsense he's talking about. At this point, Danae says she's not lying. Shisei smiles and apologizes, explaining that he never doubted her. Then he asks if the old man himself said so. He believes that his own granddaughter is different after all. The little girl, screaming, suggested that they stop laughing. Then she looked at the servants, confused as to what had happened, as the mansion's workers seemed so busy. Danae asks Theon if he thinks something is happening in the mansion. He explains that it's because of the high-ranking gathering. My brother says this is a meeting of all the relatives of the Asinov clan held once a year. All the heads of the direct and collateral line gather there, and important family matters will be discussed. For example, the succession of the family. Hearing this, the main character asks if there's any need to discuss it. He looks at her in surprise and asks if she's still an ambitious brat. Danae asks what he means. He imitates a girl's voice and says, "Of course, she's the family heir," and asks why else should they discuss it. The little girl insists that this is not the case at all, and asks if Lucas should be the successor, since he is the eldest son. And in an empire, it is natural for the eldest son to inherit the family. The girl says that since her father has already died, she thinks that the next Archduke will be Lucas. Theon says he thought she was quite a clever brat, but it seems that's not the case. And the young lady says she's very upset to hear him say that. The young gentleman asks the girl to listen carefully and calls her stupid. Then he asks if she is the Archduke's real granddaughter. He wonders if she thinks she can even compete with an adopted child who doesn't have a drop of the Archduke's blood. The main character understood what he was talking about. Then he says she's too young. And, according to Marina, ever since Lucas came of age, they say he's been playing the role of successor. And the girl understood. And when she was walking along the road to the mansion, she fell into the water and almost died. And she realized that this was because she was the Archduke's heir. And she believes that the experience of her past life, when she died without cause, having received a position she didn't want, is enough for her. Danae thought that once she became the Archduke's successor, it would probably be easier for her to destroy the Asinov family and the crown, which she never wanted. But if she needed it, she would close her eyes and seize the opportunity. The protagonist asks what will happen if Lucas hates her. Theon asks why he should hate her. She explains that he was removed from his position as the successor because of her appearance. The young lady thought that if she turned a genius like Lucas into her enemy, her plan might collapse. The young gentleman objects, saying that this can't be. He believes, on the contrary, that he will be grateful to her, since the conditions of inheritance include an unwanted marriage. Hearing this, the girl is surprised. The young man explains that there was talk that in order for Lucas to become Archduke, he would need to marry a woman from his own line. Therefore, he believes that the family tree issue will then be resolved automatically. Danae thought about how she now understood and considered what sounded reasonable at first glance, but she couldn't understand how someone could decide someone's future like that. And then she was told it was too much. The guy agreed with her and asked if she thought the same. Baratheon explains what it means to be a nobleman. After these words, the young lady approaches him and pokes her finger into his penis. He asks why, if she's acting like that. The girl asks if he is really Theon, and then says that she didn't think he could say such a thing. The boy, crying out, asks if she thinks he's a fool. He says he knows a lot too. She offers to explain Lohengrin's multidimensional control to her. Theon was surprised to hear this, and then asked how she knew such complex things. Danae explains what she saw in the book. She then reflects on how the master actually told her about this in a past life, but she can't tell him the truth. The young master asks if she's lying and if she really read about it in the book. The girl claims she learned all this from a book. Then he asks if he wants to bet her. She asks if she wins. What about writing her name with her butt in front of high-ranking guests? Theon asks why he should bet on that. The young lady asks if he's unsure of himself. The boy asks if she said everything. Then he slams his hand on the table and says he's a Baratheon and would rather die than show any uncertainty. Then he turns to the brat and offers her a try. The main character says that she will then ask Hedin to bring a book from the library. Walking down the corridor, The girl thought that this was excellent, since she had won the argument with Theon, and now she only needed to meet Lucas. Meanwhile, Theon read in a book that the girl was right, and he couldn't understand it, because he considered it incomprehensible. Danae thought that, although Baratheon had said Lucas would be grateful, she felt it necessary to personally test his reaction, and then knock on his office door. When the young gentleman saw the girl, he asked what was going on, and wondered if Theon and Shisei were fooling around again. The young lady smiled, and then said she was paying them back for teasing her in the rose garden. She then said they were in on the case because she heard he had a lot going on. Lucas says that, come to think of it, she was with Theon this afternoon and asks about it. He also wonders if she heard anything. She replies that he's right, and it occurs to her that he's quite perceptive. The young gentleman informs her that, be that as it may, Theon is too talkative. He says she shouldn't pay attention to them, as he believes everything will fall into place. The little girl asks if that's a shame. She says she heard he was planning on being adopted ever since he was adopted. The successor, Archduke Azenov, becomes the junior Archduke of House Azenov, and the girl believes this is easy to understand. Simply by remembering the fact that she was attacked, she believes everyone wants this position, because it is a position of absolute power. The main character thought that in fact, her sideline relatives also coveted this position, and they wanted to marry their daughter to Lucas by any means necessary. The young gentleman says he doesn't know, but is grateful. He explains that he doesn't want to marry in such a way as to become the successor. The little girl says she heard the same from Theon, and she says that, in truth, she herself doesn't want to become the successor, because she thinks Lucas is more suited to the position than a child like her who knows nothing. After these words, the girl became curious about what he would say. Lucas says that she really is a very caring child, and he knows she says this deliberately, based on his position. The protagonist, hearing this, doesn't understand why he took it that way. She believes that, in any case, a similar strategy for winning favor was successful. Lucas invites Danae to come closer to him. Then he asks if she's worried because it's so sudden. He says she did the right thing by coming to him instead of thinking about it alone. The young gentleman takes the girl by the hand and offers it to her, without avoiding or hiding, since this is the Azenov family's way of dealing with problems. Lucas says she's still unsure of herself, but he thinks it's okay. Then he tells her that he, Baratheon, and Shisei will be working hard to help her. Danae asks if he is telling the truth, and then says that she was curious from the very beginning why he treats her well, despite the fact that she is not his sister. The main character says she suddenly barged into this house like an uninvited guest, and she's surprised that all three of them are so kind to her. She thinks he treats her specially, and then asks if he's in danger of losing his job. The young gentleman strokes the girl's head and says that the Archduke is their savior, and for this gentleman, she is a precious treasure, which means she is the same treasure for them. Hearing this, the girl thought it was the first time she'd heard such words since her birth, and she believed she could understand how Lucas felt because she too had a lifeguard, Mr. Ryan. The protagonist thought about how she mustn't forget that her goal was to destroy the Asenov family, and she wondered what would happen if she came to the side of this beautiful world. Dana, I thought, had made up her mind because, like last time, becoming the successor, you never know when you'll find yourself in danger. She believes she needs to train her body and restore the strength of her past life. The little girl thought that she had somehow been given a second life, and this time she wouldn't die so easily. But she realized that she couldn't simply train like other people, because she used as many easy methods as possible to become stronger than others. A girl, for example, will use the mysterious pills the master prepared to boost her physical and mental strength, and she understands that if she takes them and trains, she will gain the magical power that others gain after 5 years of hard work. She will be able to achieve it in no time. Danaya thought she'd have to make the pills herself, but to remember the ingredients, she'd need to consult an herbal encyclopedia. After reading half the book, the girl realized she had found what she needed. She remembered that this was the plant she needed, and it was called melibin. And the location of this herb is in the northern continent. Danaya doesn't understand why there is so little information in this book, and thinks that the north is so huge and it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. At this time, the main character thought that she would like to become a bird to find it from the sky. The protagonist became curious about how Mr. Ryan had learned the recipe for this medicine and the method of magical training. She recalls that she had previously searched for a book containing the knowledge she had learned from the master, but most of this knowledge consisted of unusual things, not mentioned in the books. The young lady realized that, if she thought about it, Mr. Ryan was full of mysteries, for he was one of those who rarely spoke about himself, and from the very beginning he said little, only the bare essentials. Denai recalls a time when she thought he was a vicious criminal hiding his past, but in reality, he was a great sage. But she realizes there's no way to learn about him now, as lost things never return twice. The next day, Marina turns to Mrs. Yi and asks if she didn't say that she would go to meet Mr. Shisa today. Hearing this, the main character realized she'd completely forgotten. Then, crying out, she asks if she's really late, unable to understand why. The maid suggests the girl calm down. Denai realized she'd been so preoccupied with the pills and the master that she'd completely forgotten. But she realized she'd actually been the one who suggested meeting today. The girl thinks that time seems very important to him and wonders what will happen if she cancels their meeting. She considers that if he scolds her, she will perceive it as a flaw. Shise looked at her watch and said she was late. Seeing him, she thought it was terrible, since he had already arrived at the appointed place before her. Denai, crying out, asks how he can get by without knocking. He asks if she thinks he's as stupid as some people. He asks if he looks like someone who doesn't have manners. Then he suggests blaming her instead, since she didn't hear him knock loudly. The little girl realized that she was wrong and then apologized. And at that time, she thought that he was right, and she was ashamed. The guy sits down on a chair and asks what she wanted to see her about. Meanwhile, the main character was worried about him getting angry and forgot something important. The reason she wanted to see Shise was because of the outfits. The girl understands that she'll be an eyesore at the sideline meeting and can't afford to look unkempt. She believes there will be people there who are annoyed that they can't finish her off. The main character contemplates showing them the greatness and nobility of Archduke Asinov's granddaughter and let them sit and catch their own bites. But she understands that in doing so, she's not bringing this family together. Denai explains the reason she wanted to see him. The guy interrupts her, asking what her business is, and suggests she speak quickly since he's listening. The little girl looked at him and said she thought something was wrong with him because she had felt the same way in the rose garden. Then she asked if he was in pain. Shise explains that he's simply a little tired. Hearing this, the girl asks, surprised, why? The young gentleman reports that the man they quietly captured is opening his mouth. She asks who the captured man is. The young man replies that it's nothing special. Denai, crying out, asks what's wrong and what he's hiding from her. He doesn't answer though, and she wonders if Shise couldn't have said it by mistake and thinks the words escaped his lips unconsciously due to fatigue. She wonders who this captured man is. The girl recalls that when she first opened her eyes in this house, she thought she heard that they had caught the leader who had attacked the carriage. The protagonist believes that Shise is currently interrogating her and is definitely using magic. If so, she's certain he's using advanced magic to penetrate the enemy's mind. She understands that this type of magic consumes a lot of mana. The little girl grabs the boy's hand and offers to go. He asks, surprised, what she's doing. However, she doesn't answer and just walks forward. The girl reflects on the fact that, regardless of the fact that he is the #1 object of fear, she wonders why he is so persistent in trying to reveal the identity of the person who tried to take her life. The main character understands that when he is in this state, she cannot calmly talk about her outfit. Denai points to the bed and says, crying out, that she's asking him to lie down. He asks, surprised, why the bed? He wonders what she's actually up to. The girl asks if he came to help her today. And then you tell him to go to bed quickly. Shise looks surprised, and the little girl climbed onto the bed and screamed, suggesting that he go to bed quickly. The guy lay down on the bed and said that she called him, said that she had a conversation, and then asked what she was doing now. The main character stroked the boy's back and told him to sleep soundly in the yard and garden. Hearing this, he asks if she's singing a lullaby and wonders if she knows how old he is now. The baby points to his mouth, telling him to be quiet. Then she places him back in his original position. Shise says she's still too thin and asks if she's really trying hard enough. The girl asks if he's going to eat her when she gains weight. The guy wonders who would eat her, as he thinks she's tasteless. Then he says he just doesn't like the way her body is in such a terrible state. Denai insists she doesn't look so bad now. He counters that it's still terrible. She says things aren't usually that bad. A few minutes later, the main character saw that Shise had finally fallen asleep. When Marina saw this, she said she was surprised, as it was the first time she'd seen him fall asleep in front of another person. Hearing this, the main character thought that this guy is a person who sets his own boundaries. The little girl looked at him and thought that his sleeping face was like that of an angel. He must be the most handsome man in the empire until he opened his mouth. Marina says she's pleased to see something like this. The little girl says it's true, and she wonders how much better it would be if he had such an angelic face, even in normal times. The maid smiles and says that she didn't mean it that way, and explains that it's about the relationship between them. Marina says that when the girl is around, Lord Shisei is a completely different person, and she says that Lord Lucas and Baratheon are changing too. They pretend otherwise, but from the outside, it's much more obvious. Hearing this, the main character thought that she knew nothing about these three people other than their appearance. But in the eyes of those who work here, such a huge difference was visible. The maid reports that before her mistress arrived at the mansion, it was a deserted and cold place. Then she says the girl is like a warm ray of sunshine. The Asanov family's relatives was just beginning. The main character was very surprised by how many people had come. Marina asks the girl if she's surprised she's become noisier than usual. Then she explains that, by order of His Excellency the Archduke, strangers are rarely allowed into the Winter Palace. The maid says that if not now, there won't be another chance to enter this place. And in many cases, when people with invitations come in groups, they ask to go in with the rest. Hearing this, Danaya asks if that's impudent. Marina replies that it's ignorant, but that doesn't mean they can be kicked out. And so, including those who came in a group, all the guests stay in the annex. The little girl thought about how the outsiders had been completely separated from the main building, and, as expected, Archduke Asanov would not leave a gap. Marina says that at this meeting, everyone's gaze will be focused on the lady as the successor to the Asanov family. This could cause her unexpected confusion. Therefore, she thinks it's best for her to avoid the annex until the high-ranking officials' meeting is over. Danaya agrees, and at that moment she thinks that if there's no need to meet them, then there's no reason to cross paths. But she realizes there was an oversight, as in this situation, the visitors are breaking the rules. The red-haired woman asks who the black-haired girl is, as she's seeing her for the first time. The lady asks if the girl is a servant. Hearing this, the main character doesn't understand the rude tone, and she thinks the omission is that the guests were able to leave the annex. Danaya smiles and apologizes, then quietly asks Marina who this woman is. She replies that the Oset family's collateral line says the lady doesn't watch her tongue, and at first glance, it seems she's lost. The girl thought she knew who she was and was deliberately pretending. She believed the woman didn't want to see her true successor, and so she showed up to say nasty things to her. The main character believes that in such a case, a person tends to return exactly what he received. Danaya tells Marina that she thinks the guest has lost her way and offers to accompany her. Hearing this, the woman, surprised, asks if she's kicking her out now. The girl turns to Marina and suggests telling the woman that she's simply sending her back to where she belongs. The maid says she'll tell them so. The lady insists she was just taking a stroll, then asks if she's throwing her out, and then wonders if that's how they receive guests here too. Danaya suggests that the maid tell the lady that there is a walking path near the outbuilding. I heard this woman get very angry, and then, screaming, she tells her to know the limits of how much she can ignore her. And he asks, what kind of antics are you doing right under her nose? The girl says that then she too should know her own measure, because she believes that humiliating others doesn't make her better than anyone else. Suddenly, a lady in a red dress comes up to them and covers the woman's mouth. The stranger apologizes and says that her younger sister is still just a child, and that is why she was so rude. Danaya objects, saying she too acted like a child. The woman thanks her for her generosity. Then she reveals that her name is Kana Oset. At this point, the main character thought that she seemed like a good person, and unlike her sister, she had manners. The girl reveals that she is Danaya Asanov. Kana says she already knows this, as she has violet eyes, which only a direct descendant of Asanov can have. She also says that there's a popular rumor among them about her. The main character was surprised to hear this. The woman said that everyone would like to meet her. Kana says that now that she is part of the family, she suggests that they get along like sisters. Theon suddenly approaches them and picks the girl up. He asks why Canoe is here and how she can approach the main building at will. The woman apologizes and explains that she was walking along her usual path and accidentally reached the main building. Shisei asks if she couldn't have come up with a more plausible excuse. The guy tells the girl to leave because he thinks the place has an unpleasant atmosphere and it's best not to stay. The young lady asks if the culprit is telling her this. The little girl, screaming, says he let her go, but the boy continues walking, carrying her in his arms. She asks why he's ignoring her. Well, when the girl tried to hit him, she became curious about why his body was so hard. Shisei says he confronted her and asks why she's upset. She cries out and asks what kind of rude behavior he just displayed. Danae explains that nothing happened because she was the only one who said hello. Hearing this, the boy smiles, and the girl asks why he's laughing. The young gentleman asks if she knows who this lady is. Dana Iya replies that she knows her name and that she is Kana Oset. Shisei informs her that Kana Oset is one of the most likely candidates for her brother Lucas's bride. Then she asks if she knows how much that family has been bothering her brother. The young gentleman says they did all sorts of dirty tricks to make their daughter his bride. Then he objects and says that all sorts of things are wrong. At this point, the protagonist thought about how it meant that there were times when even Baratheon fell silent, and she wondered what terrible things they had done. The guy explains that it's problematic in any case. The fact that they brought her here means they haven't given up yet. He thinks they're very tough people. The girl asks why. Shisei hugs little baby tightly, and she thinks she can't even breathe. He tells her to be careful when she goes outside, but then he counters, telling her not to go outside at all, and asks if she understands. The girl asks, surprised if this is necessary. He replies that it definitely is. He explains that, if possible, she should avoid running into people from the sidelines. The main character reports that she heard avoiding and hiding is not the Asano family's method. The guy asks who said that. She replies, Lucas. Shisei says that his brother, pretending to be tough, ruined all their efforts. Hearing this, the girl didn't understand what he was talking about, but the boy refused to explain. He screams, saying that in any case, the best thing for the Asanov family is to run and hide in dangerous moments. The guy thinks it's 100 times better than being caught and dying. Then he tells her she shouldn't go out at all for a while. After that, the main character lazed around every day. Kana's words about the guests' interest in her were true. Marina passed on daily requests for meetings to her. The protagonist realizes they have reason to be interested, as Duke Asanov's granddaughter has suddenly appeared. The girl had no idea who she could meet and who she couldn't, so she chose to see no one and turned everyone down. As a result, it seemed as if Danae had listened to Baratheon's words, and the girl realized that she had been lying down all day, and that was why her back had already begun to ache. And besides, the more the baby slept, the more sleepy she became. Suddenly, the girl saw a bird banging against the window. She wondered what it wanted, and then opened the window, paskoku, thinking it wanted to be let in. As soon as the girl opened the window, the birds immediately flew into the room. Danae doesn't understand what's wrong with the bird. The bird turns to the girl and calls her his king, and says that they have finally met. Hearing this, the main character thought that only one creature called her that, and it was that scoundrel because of whom she was mistaken for the Demon King and killed. Danae asks if she's listening, as it seems the bird has spoken. At the same time, she says that such a thing is impossible. The bird addresses the girl, calls her his king, and explains that he is Blanche. He then reveals that because of her powerful and beautiful magic, he has stepped down as the Demon King. Hearing this, the girl says that her hand accidentally twitched, and at that time, she opened the window and threw this bird out of her room. The bird says that her temperament is the same now as before, and she thinks it's amazing. Then she smiles and says that she's the first person to throw her out like that. Hearing this, Danae doesn't understand why he's even happy. She asks who he is, and then claims she doesn't understand him at all or what he's talking about. The birdie says she already knows she remembers everything and smiles. He informs her that it was he who awakened her and restored her memory. The girl heard this and cried out, asking what he had just said. The bird explained that he had undergone numerous rituals to bring back his king, and he had barely succeeded in doing so 13 years ago. And so it was only recently that he had been able to awaken her memory. The birdie says he never dreamed, not even in his wildest dreams, that his king would be reborn as the descendant of that shitty family of mages. He smiles and says it's okay since he ultimately succeeded, because it's enough that she returned. Suddenly, the bird transformed into a boy and, smiling, asked if that was true. Danae looked at the child and said he was a brat. He replied that there was nothing he could do, as the magical barrier was so powerful that it took all his strength to get through it. The bird reports that after a few months, he returned to his previous appearance. The main character asks in surprise if he spent 500 years for Togo to reincarnate her. believing it to be a mad obsession. The girl says that she already said that she doesn't intend to be the Demon King, and suggests that he should have realized this since she was running away from his pursuit. The protagonist understands that it is thanks to Blanche that she will be able to live a new life, but she remembers that in her past life, she died senselessly because of this very bastard. Danae realized that running away wasn't an option, and turned to the boy, telling him that she, as his king, was giving him an order. And at that moment, she thought that while she couldn't run away, she could send him away. The girl orders this little guy to go back behind the barrier. He's surprised to hear this and replies that it's a bit problematic. She doesn't understand why and asks about it. The little boy explains that he said he used all his magic to get through the barrier. Then, screaming, he says that's why he has no strength left to go back. Hearing this, the young lady doesn't understand what to do now. And then she remembers that there is one way to expel him. She says she will then give another order. The girl said he should find her a plant, and at that moment, she thought about how this could help her find peace. Danae reports that this plant is not easy to find. She reflects that by the time he finds it, he should have regained enough strength to return to the Misty Mountains. The protagonist came to see Archduke Asinov because he wanted to see her. She realizes that, according to rumors, he was a terrible workaholic. The girl recalls that he said, Theon, that when they were adopted and first came to the Archduchy, he sat in his study all day, working tirelessly. And so he's surprised he hasn't developed mold on his backside yet. Hedin and Marina thought that perhaps he had immersed himself in work to forget the sadness of losing his family. Danae believes the truth is known. Grandfather apologizes for keeping her waiting. She replies that everything is fine, and then explains that what matters is why he called her. The gentleman said he'd heard she'd encountered the children of the Osset family. Hearing this, the girl was surprised and said that such a thing had happened. And at that moment, she thought that the news had already reached the Archduke himself. The little girl says she met them, but nothing special happened. Paskolku one was a bully, and the other was polite, and she treated them the same. The girl says she's heard the Osset family is quite powerful, and asks if that's true. He replies that while they have power, they're still a sideline. Hearing this, the main character reflected on how it seemed like there was a huge wall of power between the front and back lines, impossible to overcome. The girl said that rumor had it that Lucas was struggling because of the Osset family, and this time, they brought their 2 daughters and, it seemed, hadn't yet given up on their dream. The Archduke asks in surprise who said such nonsense. At this point, the girl thought that if she told the truth about what Theon had told her, it would only make him even more angry. And if she thought about it, Theon's words were actually vague, and it clearly contained information she shouldn't have known. Danae explains that she just heard about it. Grandpa says she shouldn't pay attention to such problems. Then he says he's glad nothing happened, and more importantly, the reason he called him today. The protagonist asks why. He replies that it's the key to the treasury. He explains that because it has a special magic attached to it. It only reacts to members of the Asinov family. Therefore, she can simply think of it at any time and in any place, and the treasury will open. Hearing this, the girl became curious about the Asinov family's treasury. She also wondered how much gold and silver treasure was there. Hearing this, little girl thought, and her heart was filled with joy, because now she understood what it meant to be the successor of the Asinov family. Grandfather explains that this is a gift for her personally, not for the successor to the Asinov family. He says that even if she doesn't succeed him, she can use the treasury without hesitation. Danae asks if he thinks Lucas is a better successor than she is. He replies that if that's the case, he's made another mistake. Then he suggests they listen to him carefully. Grandfather says the elders might ask if she's worthy of becoming the successor. They might force her to take a test to prove it. Since they support Lucas, they won't back down so easily. The Archduke claims that he will try to somehow elevate her to the position of successor. But whatever the outcome, it is not her fault, and there is no need to blame yourself. Danae says that if rumors spread that her granddaughter failed the test, then they'll point fingers at her. She also believes the entire Asinov family tree will be ridiculed because of such a dumbass. Grandpa asks if that's a problem. He says it doesn't matter what others think of her, as long as she remains herself. The gentleman says that, of course, she'll be worried about looking stupid. Then he says there's another way. He asks if she likes Lucas. Hearing this, the main character asks if he really means marrying Lucas, and thereby putting Archduke Lucas in his place. She wonders if he thinks she would want that. Grandfather says that if she doesn't mind, he thought it would be a good idea. The little girl asks how that can be, since Lucas is her brother. He claims they're not of the same blood, but the little lady insists that, nevertheless, According to the family register, he is her brother. The gentleman agreed with the girl and said she was right. Hearing this, the young lady thought that was excellent, since she had barely managed it. The Archduke says that maybe Theon or Shisei will do. The girl insists that she will be the successor, no matter what. Then she says that if she doesn't, Lucas will have to marry, which he's determined he doesn't want, and asks if this is true. Danae says that she will therefore simply become the successor, and asks what is so difficult about that. The girl contemplates saving Lucas from the abyss of an arranged marriage and winning him over, and in doing so, she will gain the right to manage the family's affairs. The main character believes that this is reason enough to wear the ridiculous crown of the successor of the cursed Asinov family. Grandfather says he respects her choice, and if it's her decision, then during the test he'll make Lucas her adjutant. Danae thought that the genius adjutant was the most joyful news she'd ever heard. Even more joyful was the treasury, and she imagined the riches within, thinking it was beyond imagination. When the main character saw the diamond ring, she thought that it wasn't as luxurious as other jewelry, but still beautiful, and she too would one day get one, considering it her lifelong dream. The little girl believes that at first glance, this treasury does not seem to contain local riches, and that's what one would expect from the unique Archduchy of Asinov. Suddenly, the girl saw the bag and, screaming, asked if it wasn't her bag. She wondered why it was lying there. The girl ponders whether that bastard Pamela must have killed her and brought this back as a trophy. She remembers that she was carrying this bag that very day. She believes that this bag too was enchanted, meaning its contents are the same as they were 500 years ago. The little girl believed she should first open the bag and slowly and precisely recite the spell. And when she removed the spell, she realized the spell had been successfully removed. The main character thought that if the master found out that she used his name, he would be very angry. Danae looked at the necklace and thought that it was a memento of the master and that she had taken it with her that day. And if her memory served her correctly, when the master was alive, the gemstone on this necklace had been a translucent blue. The girl mentally asked the master to help her carry out her revenge successfully, and she saw that the bag contained the medicine the master had made, and it was still there. The protagonist realizes that, thanks to magic, the contents of the bag remained the same, and the properties of the pills must have also remained unchanged. Danae reflects on how wonderful this is, since the training is over. She also thinks that if anyone saw this, they'd think she'd simply fallen asleep there, and she realizes she needs to get out of there now. The baby smiles because she believes that she has regained her magic, and now with a new soul and new pain, she will begin her beautiful revenge. When the girl opened the door, she saw her brothers, and she did not understand what was happening because they were calling her. Shisei screams and asks what she was even doing there. At that moment, the girl thinks her head is about to come off and tells him not to shake her like that again. She explains that she didn't do anything special. The brother claims that if she didn't do anything special, he asks why she was stuck there for 3 days. Theon, crying out, says he's a fool. If he'd known she was inside until now, he'd have had to turn the entire empire upside down to find her. And he thinks, besides, not everyone can enter the treasury. Lucas asks the girl if she's really okay and wonders if anything happened inside. She explains that she was just looking at the treasure. Theon, surprised, asks if she's claiming to have admired the treasures for 3 days straight. At that point, the girl thought it was an emergency, as her magical powers were almost completely gone and the training had taken longer than expected. The guy tells her to say something. Danae announces that she brought gifts for the 3 of them and offers to accept them. The little girl says her grandfather told her she could do whatever she wanted with these treasures. So she was wondering what to give the 3 of them. And before she knew it, 3 days had passed. The girl says she got 1 day of each, and the time flew by. At this time, the main character smiled and thought that it worked, because she thinks that she came up with an excellent trick on the fly. She says suddenly flicked the girl's face. She asked if he was crazy and hid behind Lucas. The young gentleman asks if she thinks he won't scold her if she gives him a gift. He then asks where she's seen an idiot who would spend 3 days choosing gifts. Lucas tells Shisei to calm down, as he believes the most important thing is that they're sure she's safe and sound. He explains that Shisei has been restless for the past 3 days, and then adds that everyone has been very worried about her. Dana apologizes and says she couldn't even imagine this. And then I thought about how she hadn't realized the training would take 3 days. The girl asks what happened with the elders meeting. Lucas replies that the Archduke appointed her as his successor, but the elders objected, so they decided to hold a trial to determine her suitability for the post. Shisei hands the girl an envelope and invites her to take it. Then she explains that this is a test for her from the elders. The next day, Grandfather tells Danae that these are the main documents she needs to know. When she looks at them, no one understands why there are so many. He says they are a powerful aid that will help him conduct the elders' vetting. As the Archduke promised, Lucas was sent as an adjutant. The young man said there weren't many of them, and there wouldn't be any problems. At that moment, the girl realized that there already were problems. Lucas said he would explain things so they would be easy to understand, and therefore advised her not to worry. At this time, the main character thought that this was a very large number, and it seemed to her that she would already get tired of listening to it. Danae doesn't understand why he's so agitated, and why he felt compelled to take on this role. She muses that he'll gain his freedom once she becomes his successor. The girl thinks Lucas is a genius because he explains things so clearly. Unexpectedly, she learned the details of how territorial matters are. Asinov's greatest challenge is investments. Simply put, he needs to earn money until he dies. And the reason he needs to earn so much, despite having plenty of money, is connected to the situation in the north. 500 years ago, when demons invaded the northern lands, the area suffered enormous damage, as it housed a demonic base. While all the repairs have been completed, the damage has yet to be fully repaired. Lucas says that, as a result, the cost of restoration falls on the shoulders of Asinov because those lands are under the jurisdiction of the Archduchy. Upon hearing this, the protagonist realizes that due to the barren environment, they have to buy all the resources they need to run their business from outside. The young master says you never know when or how the cost of resources will change, and the cost of maintaining the magic tower, which belongs to the Shisei, and the knightly squadron Hedin is a part of. The Archduchy pays for all of this. Danae asks, in other words, what's going on? A ton of money disappears unnoticed. She says she needs to earn enough up front to be able to handle any changes. Lucas says she's right about that and thinks she's a quick study. The young master says the elders gave her a portion of the land's funds and said they wanted to see how she could grow them. Then they told her that if the funds increased within 3 months, she would pass, and if they decreased, she would fail. The young man says the funds she will have control over for 3 months amount to 1 billion gold. He considers it a small sum, but enough to demonstrate her abilities. Lucas says that since it's an investment, it's hard to make money and easy to lose, so she needs to think about where to invest it. The young man suggests taking a book for reference, which keeps track of where previous archdukes successfully invested their money. The young woman asks if she can make an announcement. Danae says she knows little about business and would like to hear investment proposals from an expert. She believes this way she can evaluate the proposal and then invest in the business that looks most attractive. Hearing this, Lucas was surprised and said she had a good idea. At this point, the girl wondered if she was the Archduke's granddaughter looking for a business in which to invest 1 billion gold, wouldn't resourceful businessmen from all over the country be drawn to her? Danae understands that, of course, there will be swindlers who will disgrace themselves with the money her child invested. But to do that, she needs to carefully consider everything and ensure the investment is successful. And so she plans to dispose of this damned family's property as she sees fit. Lucas says it's not easy, because he'll be helping too. So he suggests the little girl not to worry, because by the time the exam is over, it'll be the social season. Then he asks, what if she thinks about it before then and makes a decision? The guy says the social season is like an annual gathering of nobles in the capital. At the same time, they celebrate the founding of the country. There's also a party thrown by the imperial family. Hearing this, the main character says she wants to go there. The guy smiles and says he thought so. He asks if she should ask her grandfather about it. Lucas says that participation in the social season is not mandatory. Well, at the Archduke's request, they haven't participated for 7 years. Therefore, he believes that if this is Danae's request, he will probably fulfill it. The next day, Danae thought about how Lucas had told her that, and she didn't understand what to do. The little girl tells her grandfather that she wants to go to the capital for the social season. He agrees and says that then they can go. The main character, hearing this, doesn't understand why he made the decision so easily. Grandfather says that, since she wants to go there so much, he doesn't mind. Danae thought about how it seemed he wasn't planning to go this year. He apparently didn't like it, and it felt like she was dragging him there by force, and then telling him that if he was busy, he didn't have to go. The Archduke objected, insisting they would go to the capital. Hey, the girl quietly thanked him, and then thought about how Grandpa never changed his mind. And once the exam was over, they could go to the capital, and he thought it was an excellent idea. Danae says she has one request. Then she says, they say dancing is required at a party, but she's never taken a dance class, so he should understand. Grandfather says that then she needs someone who will teach her to dance. Shisei entered their office and apologized. He then turned to His Excellency and said, as he had said yesterday, but he suddenly noticed that the master was looking at him strangely and asking what was going on. The Archduke turns to Shisei and says that he hopes for his help. A few days after they started training, the guy asks how many times she tells him the same thing. The girl replies that she just doesn't know how. At this point, the main character clearly realized that she, Danae Asanoff, was a real log, and in the eyes of the Shisei, she looked offended. A guy approaches a girl and tells her she's very independent. Hearing this, the girl asks if that's a bad thing. He explains that, as a rule, this is a great advantage. But during the dance, you shouldn't focus only on yourself, and she should keep in mind that there are two people dancing, and you have to work hard to synchronize with your partner. Denia says it's hard to believe, since he doesn't have the skill at all, but he's a good dancer. Hearing this, the guy asks if she can just keep quiet at a moment like this, and then pinches her cheek. Shisei lifts the girl up and says that if she can't, then let her stand on his feet, and from a distance it will look like she's dancing on her own. The little girl asks what will happen if she dances not with him, but with someone else. Hearing this, the young man asks in surprise if she will dance with another partner. He says he doesn't think the Archduke will give permission for that. Suddenly, Theon opens the door and addresses the little girl, screaming. He says he heard she's going to be learning dance from that brat. Then he asks how this even happened. Shisei asks if it's really necessary to open the door with such a noise. Then he asks, in a sense, how it happened, and says that everything he heard was just like that. Theon's a fool. Theon tells his brother not to change his name as he pleases. He tells him to shut up, since he wasn't asked. At this time, the girl thought that her brain was about to explode from the arguments of these twins. Theon asks the little girl if she really thought he couldn't dance. His brother says he's so loud and suggests she keep her voice down. Shisei turns to the girl and says that they've been interrupted by an intruder, and therefore suggests they call it a day. Hearing this, the boy asks if he means him by intruder. Shisei asks his brother if he understands the word. He replies that he can understand that too. A few minutes later, he screams and asks if he's making fun of him. Shisei says he got it faster than he thought, and that's why he thinks he's making more progress each time. The boy asks what else he'll sell to his older brother. Meanwhile, the main character doesn't understand when this will end, as she believes this situation is only escalating the tension. Danae tells the boys she's leaving. Theon asks the little one where she is. Paijote and then says he saw her legs were in terrible condition. He offers to just tell her, and he'll take her wherever she wants. The girl thanks the guy and then asks how he noticed this. He only smiles in response, and the girl tells him to take her to the garden first. But looking out the window, she sees a bird who says he's her king. The main character, screaming, says he carried her to her room. Her brother overheard and asks if she wants to go back to her room. The little girl says she'll rest there. He says she could have said that calmly and asks why she was screaming so much. At this point, Danae thought that something terrible was about to happen. She said she wanted to sleep and sent Theon and Shisei away. Then she opened the window, through which a bird flew in and turned into a child. Blanche asks her king why she's sighing so much. She replies that it's an order and says that, no matter what happens, he's not to speak of it in front of other people. He says he'll remember that. Suddenly, the boy showed the girl the bouquet of flowers she wanted to see. At this point, she was surprised and asked if he had found them. The boy replied that, for Danae's sake, he stayed awake at night, continuing his search on the southern side of the Misty Mountains. And it was not far from the place where the magical barrier weakened, so there were no problems. Blanche says there were a lot of them, so he brought him a few flowers to start with. Hearing this, the main character thought about how the south side seemed to her like the place where she lived with the master. Then she asked how many flowers there were there. The boy replies that it's bigger than this room. Then he asks if he needs more. Danae tells him to bring 10 times more than he has now. And then she thinks that if she turns this into pills, she'll be able to restore her strength to the same level she had when she fought Blanche. The boy asks if he can bring everything, and if he can stay with her. The girl asks why she even brought that up. The main character, crying out, says that more importantly, she heard that the magical barrier of the Misty Mountain weakened 15 years ago and asks if this is the work of the demon world. He replies that it is the work of black magic. Danae, surprised, asks if he's really talking about the power that awakened her. He replies that she's right and explains that since it's this magic that affects the world beyond the barrier, it was necessary to break it. Hearing this, The main character thought that perhaps the demons had begun to appear within him because of her. And with their appearance, many people lost their lives and were injured. The baby thinks that Lucas Baratheon Shise and all the other people she doesn't even know can't even imagine how many people suffered from this. And she thinks she was the cause of all the tragedies. The girl reflects on the fact that she has been trying to survive until now by following the master's teachings. The master said that Danae should not become someone who harms others, and under no circumstances should she use his teachings to kill anyone. And so, when Pamela attacked her, she didn't fight back. The protagonist believes that if she fought with all her might, she would win. But then many people would bleed to death, which contradicts the master's teachings. She reflects that if she remains in despair, nothing will change. The girl believes that if there's time to regret what's already happened, it's better to spend it making things right. Then she turns to Blanche and asks him to teach her how to restore the barrier. The guy says the barrier wasn't erected by demons, so he doesn't know. She asks if there's a way to prevent demons from crossing the barrier. He replies, no, since demons act instinctively and can't be controlled. Danae asks Što Yesli if she will order him to deal with the demons who cross the barrier. He replies that he will not deal with them, but if she agrees to keep him by her side, they will follow her orders. The girl asks if he's bargaining with her now. Then she says there's nothing she can do and asks him to promise her 2 things. She says he'll appear as a bird in front of others and will only speak to her when they're alone. The girl asks if he can keep that promise. Blanche says he'll do it all without any problem. At that moment, Marina enters the room and asks what kind of cute bird it is. Then she says it's the first time she's seen one so plump and wonders if it can even fly. At this point, the main character thought they were almost caught. She explains that the bird follows people and didn't want to leave the room. Hearing this, the maid smiled and asked if it was true. Then she said that she probably liked her mistress. The girl agreed and said that it seemed so. And at that moment, she thought that he was pursuing her because he liked her so much. Denaya asks what Marina is holding. She replies that posting ads was helpful. Then she shows how many offers she's received. At this point, the main character thought about how she would show the elders what she was capable of, and thus surprise them. She believed that among all this mountain of letters, she would find the goose that laid the golden eggs. After the announcement, numerous proposals poured in, but not a single one caught my eye that would be suitable for passing the elders test. The next morning, as soon as the girl opened her eyes, she immediately began scanning the sentences, but there was no end to them. Her eyes began to hurt from this, and besides, she was tired of reading this nonsense. The bird asks her king if he should delegate this task to his servants. She replies that it is impossible, as this is her test, and, of course, she must pass it herself. She believes she will only be valuable if she independently paves the way to her future. Suddenly, the girl jumped up, and the bird said she was very scared because of this. Danae, screaming, said that she had found it. Long ago, her ancestors traveled across the continents. They were engaged in trade and, through it, amassed a great fortune. Then one day, on the return journey, after concluding a major deal, the ship was sunk in a storm. It was called the Celestial. The ship was laden with enormous profits from trade deals and family treasures. The incident ruined their family. Extracting the ship's wealth is a situation unimaginable. After reading this letter, Lucas asks if this is truly her choice. He wonders if she has a special reason for it. The girl asks if it's cool that this ship is full of treasure. And besides, there are family heirlooms buried there. She feels sorry for him, so she wants to help. Hearing this, the clever Lucas found no words to respond. The girl saw that his expression seemed to be asking whether these were the only reasons. She was pondering the fact that she hadn't chosen for these reasons at all. The young gentleman thought that she was absolutely sure of this. Malishka спрашивает, хочет ли он спросить, как она может быть так уверена в этом? Danae remembers what the fairies told her about this ship 500 years ago, and she believes that Master Rian's necklace must have brought her luck, because she understands that such a coincidence simply couldn't have happened, and she's been wearing the necklace ever since she set foot on it. Lucas says that if she's chosen him, he can do more research. The girl replies that she's already invited him. A man enters the room and says his name is Diego. She asks Togo if she'd like to hear his story. Danae turns to the man and says she was impressed by his proposal and heard how hard he worked to restore family values. Diego says the lady is the first to respond to his proposal. He wipes tears from his eyes and explains that everyone kicked him out, telling him to stop talking nonsense. The little girl turns to Lucas and says that everyone is too cruel and asks if that is true. The man insists it's a sad story and isn't bluffing. He then reveals that it's true that the ship contains treasure, as several years ago he discovered travel notes left by his ancestors and pinpointed the exact location of the ship's sinking. Diego believes that this way they can easily find the ship of the heavenly Ceteleno, Veda. The girl thought about what she had heard and then asked if there were any records of the voyages. The man says that Ceterenia is located in the eastern waters of the continent, and on the ship are ancient gold coins, used as currency during trade. Their current value reaches 100 billion. Diego says that if she invests 1 billion gold, he will give her half of the profits from the Ceratili ship. Meanwhile, the protagonist notices that the ship's name changes every time he speaks. She suspects that perhaps it's because he's learned to be cautious that he hasn't received any investment yet. She understands that this only increases Lucas's suspicions. Danae thought she doubted it to the max. She thought the man was very strange, and she hadn't thought the Baron's stupidity had given them the opportunity. The girl says she wants to sign the contract right now. Lucas is surprised to hear this and asks if she's serious. The young lady replies that she is quite serious and asks why they invited him here if they didn't want to. Diego, crying out, declares that he will finally be able to reclaim the family treasures. Then it is revealed that the lady is their family's benefactor. The main character believes this isn't a favor, but a mutually beneficial deal. She understands he'll definitely succeed in extracting the treasure, and they'll give him some money. Denaya says she'll be looking forward to it, and instead, the money is split 8-2. And of course, she gets 8. Hearing this, the man is surprised, and the girl assures him that if he doesn't receive the investment, his profit will be 0. She says he'll miss out on this opportunity and asks if he has another option. The man says it's too small. The main character agrees to raise the number to 3. Then she says she won't give in anymore, and if he refuses, there will be no investment. Diego, opening the door, says that's quite enough for him. Danae thought the operation had been a success, and that her original goal had been to obtain the 7 pieces. She turned to Lucas and asked if he'd heard, then suggested he prepare the contract. The guy asks Danae in surprise if she agrees to this. Meanwhile, in the Winter Palace Annex, Kana is talking to her father. The man addresses his daughter and says she's a low-class whore who started acting up. He knows she recently invited a businessman to the mansion and asks if she knows what to do. The girl says he doesn't have to worry about it. However, the father wants to know what it means. Kana explains that the businessman she called was the famous pauper Baron Diego. Hearing this, the father smiled and, crying out, said that now he understood, because he knew all along that the Archduke's granddaughter was nothing but a foolish child, and he had heard that Lucas had been assigned to her as an adjutant, but even he couldn't dissuade her. The gentleman believes that, deep down, Lucas also aspires to the Archduke's position. The girl says that if he doesn't, she'll be in a difficult position, and she has nothing more to say, since this is all about achieving the status she's dreamed of since childhood. Kana always wanted to marry into the Asanov family, which even the Emperor fears, and she wants to possess immense power, which she can control as she pleases. The girl believes this will allow her to pay off her father's debts. Her marriage to Lucas was originally predetermined, using this as collateral. Her father borrowed money from all sorts of sources. With this money, the father lived luxuriously and gambled. But then the Archduke's granddaughter suddenly appeared, and the arranged marriage was annulled, and the Oset family, left with only a huge debt, is now on the road to ruin. Kana understands. Kak! It was hard for her, a child from the sideline, to get here, and she doesn't understand what good kinship is. A girl from the direct line who didn't even lift a finger will get everything in one go. The girl believes that the goddess Rosiante will definitely understand her. A few days later, Bird asks how he could have locked her in a birdcage. Danae tells him to stop, then explains that he stays in her room and doesn't fly away. That's why Marina so carefully prepared a cage for him. The girl reminds that she has told him many times to watch when he speaks. Isop Shayetstro, her accompanying knight Hedin, will arrive soon. The bird says that there is not a single demon in which he can believe, even as in him, and then he asks why she speaks with such distrust. The main character, screaming, declares that she doesn't trust him. Suddenly, Lucas enters the room, followed by the girl, screaming and asking why he's suddenly there. The boy said her judgment was correct, and Baron Diego had just sent a letter saying he'd found the ship. The girl was surprised to hear this. Diego tells the lady he's so glad he can repay her. He then explains that, thanks to her, his family's generation-long trading business is now possible again. Denai says everything went well. Then she asks how much treasure was on the ship. He replies that there were many more gold coins than expected. Diego says that given the market price of ancient gold coins, he thinks there is a potential profit of 200 billion, which is double what he originally expected. The main character asks how much she can expect to earn. The man replies that with the down payment she initially gave him, as agreed, he's giving her 140 billion, which is a 70% profit. Hearing this, the girl thought that she had an investment of 1 billion and she would receive 140 billion. The man announces that he now plans to put his heart and soul into trading. He also says that if she needs help with their trading company, he'll be happy to help. At this point, the main character smiled and thought that this wouldn't happen. She believed she had earned 140 billion and therefore had already passed the test. All that remained was for her to become the successor and spend all the money to destroy this family. This one is thinking about how she will destroy the Asanoff family and make Pamela Asanoff shed bloody tears in the afterlife. Lucas tells the girl that they also returned their investment without a hitch and received 140 billion in ancient gold coins. He claims that cashing out the gold coins will take time, but the fact is, they made a huge profit, so they can rest assured. Danae asks if the elders recognize her. He replies that of course they do, and then asks who wouldn't recognize her for such a tremendous achievement. Lucas strokes the girl's head and says that he actually thought it wouldn't work out between them. He knew Baron Diego was a notorious swindler in high society, and so he kept trying to figure out a way to recoup his investment in the Baron. The young gentleman says he always decided whether to invest based on information alone. Napisanych w dokumentach i on думал, что нет ничего более точного, чем числа и вероятность. И оказывается, это не все. The girl looked at the guy and thought about what that was really all about, because she believed it was a decision she made based on certain information, and she couldn't say that even if she died. Lucas says she was right to look at it from a different perspective, and thanks to her, he's realized a lot. And then he tells her that she truly has the right to take the Archduke's place. At this time, Denaya thought that she had finally earned Lucas's trust. A few days later, Marina informs the lady that more letters have arrived. Hearing this, the main character thought that rumor had apparently spread that she had earned 140 billion, and in an instant, every possible entrepreneur sent her an offer. Denaya realizes she's reached her goal and is no longer considering investing. Meanwhile, she's unsure what to do, believing there's no need to deliberately increase the workload. But she also understands that the 3-month trial period hasn't yet ended. The girl realized she had no choice but to pretend to be a diligent successor. And at that moment, she thought about how she would simply skim through it and put it aside. Suddenly, the girl saw that her guest, Kana, had come to see her. She asked if Lady Denai had been well. The protagonist greeted Lady Kana and asked if she'd been out for a walk today and wandered down the wrong path. She replied that she hadn't been out for a walk, but had business with her mistress, which was why she'd come. She then apologized for being so thoughtless and not having arranged a meeting. Kana says she heard that Denaya can't get enough rest because she's so busy with work. She asks if it would be nice to go to the auction house together and catch her breath. The girl was surprised to hear this. The lady explained that this renowned auction house was planning to present all kinds of rare items. Then she said she had invitations and would like to come and admire them with her. She then asked if she would mind. At this time, the main character thought about what she was suggesting to go and watch the auction, and considered that this was clearly not her real goal. The girl remembers that Theon, who gets upset over trifles, but does not get angry and in no way neglects his activities in front of Kana Osset. Denaya says she thinks this auction will be quite interesting, and says she definitely wants to participate. The protagonist understands that she obviously has an ulterior motive, but she believes she can play along. She says she's looking forward to it. On the day of the auction, the main character asks if they didn't just come to watch. Kana looks surprised and asks if she's forgotten how he said he wanted to participate. He explains that the pleasure of attending an auction is viewing rare items. It's all about assessing the value of the item and setting a price. The Marquise says there are many rare items on display this time, and she's sure there will be some she'll like. She then explains that if she likes anything, she can pick up the badge and see what she's holding. Hearing this, the main character understood the reason for coming here together. Auctions can bring in a lot of money, depending on the conviction of the person wanting to buy something, but they can also cause losses. Denai understands that a 13-year-old child, who until recently lived as a commoner, cannot have a keen eye for fine things. She believes this is a ploy to use the auction as a pretext to squander her hard-earned wealth. The main character understands what must be happening. She thinks that if someone is nearby to incite her, she will spend a bunch of money on useless items. The security guard turns to the little girl and says that if she buys some junk, she'll get it from that guy. She asks who he's talking about. He explains that he's talking about that asshole. Denai tells him not to worry, then announces that she'll buy amazing things and surprise everyone. Kana says she'll be there to help, as she's sure everyone at the auction will be amazed. The man announces that they're starting an auction. He then shows us an item, a landscape painting. He says it's a work by Belwaz, currently gaining popularity in the capital. Kana turned to the lady and said that this was already the 20th lot, and asked if she had any desire to buy anything. At that moment, the girl thought that she would get burned for looking down on her. Denaya believes it is the endurance and patience that was cultivated, thanks to Master Caladrian. The Marquise says that the artist Belwa, who painted this picture, is so great that even the imperial family commissioned paintings from him. At this point, the main character thought that no matter how unsweet her words, she still wouldn't be able to captivate her. Kana says that if she doesn't win the auction now, she'll regret it. Danae thought about how the price of a painting usually rises after the artist's death, and she doesn't understand what to do with the painting of someone who is now actively working in the capital. She thinks even an illiterate person would know. The Marquise offers the lady to buy that painting quickly, and then grabs her hand. Hedin asks Kana why she doesn't buy it herself. Hearing this, the young lady supports him and says he's right. The guard says, Lady Kana seems to have a good understanding of art. Then he reminds her that she said you should buy what you like at an auction, so he suggests she buy it quickly. Denai takes the Marquise's hand and raises it. Hedin, crying out, says that guest number 4 is offering 500 million. The man says that if anyone wants to make a higher bid, they should raise their hand, but no one takes it. Then he congratulates the Marquise and announces that Belos's landscape has been sold to guest number 4 for 500 million. At this point, Kana felt very angry. A few minutes later, she turns to the mistress and asks, "What about that pot?" The girl asks if she's really enjoying something again, and raises her hand again. The man running the auction says that guest number 4 won the bid for 600 million. A few minutes later, it's announced that it was for 800 million. Kana turns to the lady and says, it's her first time at the auction house, and she needs to buy at least this piece of art. The protagonist says it's truly a stunning statue, and then picks up number 4. Denai thanks Theon, but he doesn't understand what she's talking about and asks what he did. At this time, the main character thought that he was speaking without any sense, and believed that in such a situation, fools should be feared. At the end of the auction, the man announces that he is bidding on a tapestry with an inscription in an ancient language. Its price starts at 1 million gold pieces. Hearing this, the protagonist asks if the other auction items at least started at 5,000 gold pieces, and she thinks it looks like a child scratched it. The young gentleman says that the presenter also looks unsure and thinks that it might be a fake. Denaya thought it was genuine and hoped the knowledge she'd gained from Master Rian would help her. She thought she might be lucky this time too. She realized she hadn't learned it perfectly and couldn't interpret everything. However, there could be no mistake, as this was the language of the Riam, the ancient kingdom of magic. The young lady looked and thought that it looked like there were coordinates marked there. She guessed that Lucas might know a complex ancient language. Therefore, she thought she should test her luck and then move on to number 2. The host says that the tapestry with the ancient inscription goes to guest number 2. Danae tells the lady that it is quite fun to bet on what you like and asks if she is telling the truth. When they return to the mansion, Theon said that she was so happy to return with this trash. Hearing this, the girl screams and claims that this is not trash, but a tapestry with an inscription in an ancient language. And then she asks if this is a masterpiece. Theon smiles and asks if she said it was a masterpiece. Then he insists, crying out, that there's a limit to stupidity. She asks why he's talking to her like that and insists it really is a masterpiece. The young master, crying out, says her head is a masterpiece since she bought such trash for 5,000 gold pieces. He believes she was full of determination after saying she was the heiress with the jeweled eyes. Denaya says it's a great work, written in an ancient language. He asks if she believes that, as he thinks it's a ploy to sell the piece. Lucas settles their argument and says it's true. He then says he thinks he can interpret it. The girl says that, as expected, she knew Lucas would understand. Lucas says that he has read books about ancient languages before, and that this language may be that of the ancient kingdom of Riam. The main character heard this and thought that he had said the right answer. Then she asked what was written there. The young gentleman replies that it contains coordinates and lowercase letters. It says that in the last moments of their lives, they leave their relics here, which they wish to pass on to their ancestors. Lucas says it's some kind of treasure map, and if Riam's relics are buried under these coordinates, they've hit the jackpot again. Then he strokes the girl's head and says she's gorgeous. She really does have a diamond eye. Denai explains that it's beautiful, and that's the only reason she bought it. She believes she's in luck. Theon looked at the girl in surprise and asked if she really knew everything. She asked, surprised, what he was talking about. The boy replied that it was nothing serious, since he didn't think such a thing could happen. Theon suggests his brother decipher these coordinates quickly. He says the magic tower also needs to be informed, and if they're going to find the treasure, they'll need people. At this point, the young lady thought that everything was going perfectly, and she felt as if she was not only benefiting from the master's necklace, but also receiving protection from the goddess Rosianta. She felt it was as if she had found the treasure, and later, when the family was ruined, she would take it for herself. A few days later, the main character thought Lucas deservedly earned the nickname Genius. Not only had he analyzed the coordinates in a single day, but he'd also prepared the necessary documents for the excavation. Lucas says permission to excavate has been granted, and the Magic Tower has also formed an excavation team and said they'd be happy to assist. He believes this is such an important project and expects Shisei to personally lead the excavation team to Nastan, where the relics are located. Denai thought that if he ever claimed to be an alien, she wouldn't be surprised at all. Lucas says the Elder's trial is almost over and asks if she knows this is the final push, believing that if this excavation is successful, she will be able to further strengthen her position as successor. The young master touches the girl's hair and reminds her that what he said earlier wasn't a lie. He says that Shiseteon and all of them will become her strength, and therefore advises her not to worry. At this point, the protagonist thought about how she couldn't give in to weakness. Even he, though an adopted son and not a direct descendant, was still connected to Pamela, who had left her, and she thought she couldn't forget, because this life was the only chance she had to destroy the Asanov family. On the day of the excavation team's departure to Nastan, Danae went out to see Shisei off, but he was not there, and she became curious about where he was. When the girl saw the guy, she became interested in what kind of clothes the man was wearing. Going on an excavation, Theon tells the girl that even as he's gotten older, he hasn't changed, because he thought he was going looking for a bride. Not a dig. Shosei says he heard everything and calls his brother Bolvation. The guy claims that he is a Baratheon and then says that besides him, there is not a single younger brother who would distort the name of his elder brother in such a way. Shisei says he was only born a few minutes earlier and asks how he's still an older brother. And so he thinks the obvious reason he came out to see him off is that he thinks he'll be gone for 10 years and then return. The boy replies that he sees right through him. Then he says he's been hearing this for years, and it was strange not to know. The brother says that with age, he won't remain unchanged. At this point, the main character thought their arguments had started again. Then Lucas turned to the two of them and told them to stop. He even asked on the day of their departure if they were going to argue. Lucas tells Shisei to be careful, as it's unknown when demons might appear. He tells him not to worry, as he believes the likelihood of that happening is extremely low. Shisei says they only appear in the northern regions, and they're heading toward the center of the continent, so there won't be any problems. Lucas says that's been the case up until now, but he thinks caution isn't a bad idea. Denaya tells Shisei not to overdo it and advises him not to put too much effort into searching for the relics. He says that's a strange piece of advice. The girl says he just shouldn't overdo it, since without Shisei, there's no one to teach her how to dance. She tells him to come back quickly. The guy looked at the girl strangely, and she asked what she said. He replied that nothing had happened, saying it was new. Then he asked how many fingers she had. The girl replied that she had 10. Shisei suggests that she should count well by folding her fingers one after the other, and asks if she understands. After Shai's left, the girl asked Lucas what her fingers had to do with the relics. He explained that he meant he'd finish the job in 10 days and return. Theon speaks naturally, which is incomprehensible when he speaks in such a manner. Lucas believes that Shisei is expressing affection in his own way because he wants to fulfill Danae's request for a speedy return. Hearing this, the girl says she now understands and wants him to quickly find the treasure and return. She asks why Riam's kingdom of magic collapsed. Danae says it's unusual for a Shisei to show interest in this matter. She believes that if the kingdom hadn't been destroyed, it would now be a major power. The brother looked at the girl in surprise and asked if she really didn't know even such a basic story. She thought about how she had never had a private tutor, either in her past life or in this one, and she had never gone to school. The main character thinks the person might not know and doesn't understand why it's being shoved in their face. Since she was busy learning how to protect her life, she didn't care. Lucas apologizes and says he's sorry the outpost made her feel uncomfortable. He says he told the girl about the situation in the north, but forgot to mention his other knowledge. Her elder brother says that after the Soviet season and the Elders test, she needs to go to the capital. He believes that to avoid embarrassment, she should know about the imperial family. The gentleman says that Riam is an important country, connected to the imperial family. And after all, there's a very good teacher, and he's confident the Archduke will grant her permission to assign her. Lucas tells her he'll introduce her to a good teacher. The girl is surprised to hear this, and she doesn't understand what kind of person this teacher is whom Lucas introduces to her. And after a while, a gentleman with bright red hair comes into the room and says that he is pleased to meet the lady, and to say his name is Jedin Latessa. At this point, Danae thought it was Hedin's brother, and then the guard appeared, the younger brother, panicking in the unexpected situation. The teacher says he's been told she usually conducts research in the magic tower. He asks if she's well informed. Jedin reports that the research department where he works studies the history and technology of magic, as well as its uses. Furthermore, since he researches many different topics, he's very busy every day. The teacher says that he cannot therefore waste a minute or a second, and therefore only suggests emphasizing the main points and briefly explains to the lady. Denaya thought that he and his younger brother had completely different characters. The teacher suggests looking at the relationship between the ancient kingdom of Riam and the Empire. He believes it's important to first explain why Riam disappeared. It's said that the kingdom vanished suddenly due to a collision with a huge meteorite that fell from the sky one day. He says much of the research is still shrouded in mystery, and he believes that if the discovery noted on the tapestry does indeed lead to artifacts, it will be a historic discovery that will astound the world. And then he says that they too have great hopes. At this time, the main character thought that they could wait and watch, since, without a doubt, the real artifacts would be found. The teacher says he wants to tell you about the Kirin Empire. The ancestor of the Kirin Empire wielded immense power. He united the continent and built the current empire. The girl asks what kind of immense power it is. He replies that it's the power of a dragon. The ancestor of the Kirin Empire had gained the power of a dragon. At this point, Denaya thought that perhaps, because she was studying history for the first time, everything seemed new to her, and she remembered that Master Rian hadn't even told her about it. The dragon's power was called Caladrian. The girl was surprised to hear this. The teacher said there were connections here to the ancient magical kingdom of Riam, and reported that not many records remained from them. Denai asks him to wait for a second. Jadin asks the student if she understood something. The main character asks if Caladrian refers to the dragon's power and is not a human name. The teacher replies that anyone bearing the name Caladrian would already be in prison. After all, the imperial family tried their best to conceal the power of the dragon Caladrian. The dragon's power was so powerful that it would be a sin to call a human by that name. At that moment, the girl realized that the words weren't reaching her ears. Jedin Gavarit that he will go on to tell that among the small number of records left from the ancient kingdom of Riam is this word Caladrian, and according to the records, it means the first dragon. Therefore, in some sources, the ancestor of the imperial family did not acquire the power of a dragon. Instead, it is assumed that he encountered a dragon. Hearing this, Danae thought that the master was a dragon, and he wanted her to believe it. And she figured a dragon couldn't just fall ill and die. Master Caladrian, it's a sharp turn, and she doesn't understand what his true identity was. A few days later, the protagonist realized that there were still 3 days left until the promised 10 days of Shisei. She realized that there was usually no news from him, and the elder's trial would end in 3 days. Danae feels like her head is going to explode because she hasn't heard from this guy, and she wonders if she's the only one worried about this. At this point, the bird turns to its king and says he thinks she's bored. He tells her she's had enough of doing this or that. Then he asks if he would take advantage of the moment and destroy all the people in the world. The young lady says she's not bored at all, actually. She believes she's different from them demons and isn't interested in destroying or conquering the world. The girl says that she is simply busy destroying this Azanov family. Danae grabbed the bird and, screaming, told him to fly right now. The bird didn't understand where it should go and asked about it. She replied, to Nistan. and he explained that he should fly and see what was happening with Shisei. The bird, surprised, asks its king what it cares what the object of its vengeance is doing. Screaming, it tells him to stop talking nonsense and fly faster. The protagonist thought that if the artifacts were found, she might learn new truths about the master. She believed that any means necessary would ensure the excavation of the ruins was successful. On the evening of the last day of the Elder's test, Marina informs the lady that young Master Shisei has returned. Hearing this, the girl quickly ran over and asked if it had been hard and if he had hurt himself anywhere. He told his brother that he would rest and everything would be fine. Then he suggested not to worry, since he was no longer a 2-year-old. Danaya asks Shisei if he returned alive, but she does not understand why he is so exhausted and asks what happened. The guy says to stop shaking him because he feels like he's going to throw up. The girl asks if he was attacked by demons, and if that's why he feels sick. The boy turns to the little girl and says he used teleportation magic to rush to her, and then he throws up. Hearing this, the main character thought that this was incredible, since this was one of the most difficult magics. Baratheon says that, as expected, the Sage of the Sorcerer's Tower is not so simple. Then he asks if he's used this magic only once. He also inquires how long it will take to get here. Shisei asks, can't he see that the person using this incredible magic is exhausted? Then he turns to the girl and says that, in any case, she wasn't waiting for him, but for this. A boy tossed a gold coin to a girl. She asked what it was. Shisei explains that this is a legacy of the Riem Kingdom. He explains that it can no longer be made in their time. He suggests she take a closer look, as this small gold coin is engraved with an ancient magical formula. The young master says they'll know for sure if they conduct a thorough investigation in the Magic Tower after the trial is over. But he believes this is clearly a historic discovery. The guy grabs the girl by the head and then hugs her and screams, saying that it looks like the baby is amazing because this time there is a ship with treasure, and this time it is obvious that she has a talent for making money. The young gentleman says she seems to have a keen sense of smell for money. Then he asks if she has a dog's nose. Danae angrily asks who he just called a dog. Shisei says that, in any case, there are times when his brother makes mistakes. Then he reports that he heard the coordinates on the map differed from the actual location, which is why the search took some time. Lucas apologizes and says he didn't think about the change called a seismic shift. At this point, the main character looked at the guy and thought about how he'd been working so hard he hadn't even slept, and thought such things were possible. She then asked how they knew the location had been changed. Shisei replies that a bird suddenly appeared and told them. The main character heard this and was surprised, but the guy looked at the bird next to her and said that this bird looked like the other one. The girl doesn't understand when this bastard arrived. The guy asks if it was the bird she raises that gave the location, and he says it could be the same bird that brings good luck. Danaya ponders the fact that he flew to monitor the traffic and doesn't understand why he gave the coordinates. She realizes she's now in his debt and considers this a fatal mistake she never even considered. The main character believes that, as expected, she should not have let her guard down with this demon. Around the same time, in the Winter Mansion's annex, Father cries out and asks his daughter how this happened. He claims she was supposed to make sure the girl spent her money, but he can't understand how she ended up earning it. The man asks his daughter what she understands about this, and then says that if she does not become an archduchess, their family will come to an end. Kana says she knows this, and that's why she wants to put everything back the way it was, because she believes everything was perfect until that baby came along. The father says he's disappointed with everything, starting with that failed attack on the carriage. Then he tells his daughter to figure it out completely next time. On the day of the announcement of the results of the Elder's examination, Marina informs the lady that the day has finally come. The girl thought that the day had finally come when she would become the successor and be able to actively carry out her revenge. The guard informs her that the elders are waiting in the other room. Marina says that when she's finished, they'll accompany her. Danaya opens the door and thinks it's great that it's time to go out. Suddenly, the protagonist sees a bird and asks why it's there. The bird replies that it can't afford to be absent from such a place of honor, believing it to be natural for a subordinate who has sworn allegiance. The girl tells him to leave, but the bird objects and says he won't leave under any circumstances. Marina asks the lady what happened, and she suggests they ignore it and then pretend everything is fine. When the main character opened the room, something strange happened. The birdie says they must have entered a zero-gravity chamber. Danai screamed, asking what the hell was going on. And the moment she opened the door, a strange magic activated. She didn't expect to suddenly start falling like this. so she begs Blanche to do something. The main character says that this is an order and suggests using any method right now. When the young lady fell, she looked around, confused as to where they were or what this place was. But suddenly she saw Blanche, who had gone from being small to being a big guy. He said it couldn't be since she even had a queen's weight, and then he announced that he had lost again. The girl insists that he's the one who's small, not she's the big one. Then she says that everyone, on the contrary, is worried that she's too thin. Meanwhile, in the Winter Mansion, the master, crying out, asks why it's taking so long to find one child. He wonders how the sage of the magic tower can't solve such a problem. Baratheon tells him to shut up, then asks how many times he has to repeat himself. He explains that several mages have been using advanced magic to hinder the search. The boy says that if he's not a god, it's simply impossible to instantly destroy this magic. The twin, screaming, tells him to become a god quickly. The boy asks if he'll continue to talk nonsense. Shisia asks the Archduke where he went. He replies that he should ask the culprit. The guy, surprised, says he knows who the culprit is and will go ask. Then he starts scratching his head, unable to understand how it all happened. At this time, the girl, sitting in the dungeon, Uslishla heard a voice, and when she looked over the wall, she saw that someone was lying tied up on the floor. When the main character untied the man, she saw a girl of a different race. Then, screaming, she told her to look at the blood and believed that the bleeding needed to be stopped first. The stranger asks Danae what she's doing now and wonders how she could tear such a beautiful dress. The protagonist tells her to ignore it, and then informs her that if she returns to the mansion, she has plenty more dresses like it. The little girl says that she will never be able to return because they will soon be sold. Danae says that this is illegal in the Empire, and asks who dared to do such a thing. Suddenly the door opened and men entered the room. One of them looked at the girl and said that, now that she was here, he considered her a special commodity, one that was truly different. The stranger says she's immediately visible from afar. Her value and clothing look very expensive, and judging by her appearance, he wonders if there will be a pursuit. The master tells him not to worry, as they've stationed dozens of mages outside. He believes that even if they send pursuit, they won't achieve anything. At this point, the bird looked at them and thought that there were only 5 people and found it boring. The girl asked what he was planning to do and suggested that they just sit quietly until she gave the order to do nothing. A man picks up a girl and asks who she is, who's so thin, like a sheet of paper. She asks him to look at what she said about being thin, and asks why he suddenly said she weighs a king. The stranger asks who she's talking to. The servant, screaming, offers to take a look, as the girl has untied the ropes. Meanwhile, the girl of another race begins to fight the man off, but he's stronger and beats her. At that moment, Danae looked at them, her memories of the past washing over her like waves. Memories of terrible pain came to her mind, and anger boiled inside. The gentleman offers to put the 2 girls in a crate, then announces that a ship will arrive in an hour. They must load them in immediately. Danae points and asks what's there. Then he turns to Blanche and tells him to fly at full speed. The man asks the little girl if she's fooling around. Then he tries to catch the bird, but instead hits his friend. A bald man grabs a man and asks what the idiot is doing. He replies that he didn't understand because something scurried past him like a rat. The gentleman asks what they're doing now and wonders if they can load them into the crate faster. The main character tells the bird that this time there's an attack, and with the bird's help, a fight breaks out between the men. The gentleman looks at them, confused as to what's going on. Meanwhile, in the Winter Mansion, the man asks if it's true that this lady was kidnapped. He also asks what the Archduke will do now, as he doesn't understand how such chaos could have happened. The Archduke announces that he is giving 10 minutes, and during this time, if the culprit of the kidnapping does not confess, then he is going to cut off one hand from everyone present here. Hearing this, the board of directors asks what's going on and whether he suspects them. The gentleman informs them that until the culprit is found, he will cut off one of their arms in 10 minutes, and then a leg in 10 minutes. The men say that even though he's the head of Asanov, he still can't act so arbitrarily, and they wonder what kind of arbitrary action this is without any kind of trial. The Archduke says there are 9 minutes left, and he won't repeat it twice. Then he announces that he will cut off the head for the last time. Suddenly, the man stands up and says, "Sir, that he shouldn't say such absurd things," and he announces that he's leaving here. The Archduke says that the Knights of the Mist are guarding this place, and no one will be able to leave without his permission. Then he announces that there are 8 minutes left. At this point, a quarrel broke out between the gentlemen, as they blamed each other, Each wanted to shift the blame onto the other. Meanwhile, the others turned to His Excellency and declared that they had nothing to do with it. They asked him to have mercy on them. The Archduke grabs his sword and declares that time is up, but suddenly, a girl opens the door to the room and addresses His Excellency, asking him to wait and suggesting that he listen to her. The gentleman asks what's going on. Kana says that, without a doubt, her father is the culprit behind the kidnapping, and he was the one who orchestrated the kidnapping. And as proof, she'll tell them where Danae is. Hearing this, the father screams and asks his daughter what she is saying. The Archduke offers to tell us more. At this time, while in prison, the man wants to put the main character in a box. The master says that it is disobedience to even push them into a box. The man asks if everything will be all right, since the girl seems to be from a noble family, and she has a special eye color, which somehow bothers him. He says it doesn't matter what color your eyes are, and claims that the less you know, the better you sleep. The stranger believes that whoever the buyer was, the broker likely received a considerable sum. He believes the best thing to do is sell it as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the men heard a strange sound, and one of them thought it was an earthquake. The master suggested that the servant go check out what was going on. As soon as the servant opened the door, he was immediately punched in the face. At that moment, the main character saw Theon. He screamed, telling them to take their hands off the baby immediately. The man looked at the gentleman and asked if this was the power of the sword, and if he really was a sword master. The other man, crying out, asked what the mages were even doing outside. Theon says he's already in a bad mood because his little sister was kidnapped, and until he changes his mind, it would be best if he meekly obeys his words. The robber pulls out a knife and grabs Danae and asks, "It seems they don't care at all about what happens to this young lady." The gentleman says he wants to see if he dares to do anything to the Asenov family's heir. At that moment, the Archduke appears in the room. He asks the girl if she's scared and if she's hurt herself. The young lady replies that she's not hurt anywhere and is perfectly fine. Grandfather, crying out, says she doesn't even know how worried he was. Theon picked up the feather and thought about how blue it was, then asked what was wrong with the dress. The girl explained that she tore it to stop the bleeding. Hearing this, the boy screams and tells them to call a doctor quickly, as the baby's life is in danger. She explains that it wasn't her, but someone else. Danae turns to her grandfather and says she doesn't want to see any killings. She also suggests that the Shisei not use her spells there. The protagonist understands that there have been such twists and turns in life. However, the first thing she did after taking her place as successor to the Archduchy was... The young lady was all about work, and she screamed, saying she didn't understand anything. She thought she'd earned so much money and couldn't understand why they'd entrusted her with such trivial tasks. Danae asks Lucas why, and explains that she wants to be assigned more important tasks. He explains that even if she is the successor, she is still 13 years old. The guy says it's difficult to trust her with the estate yet. He asks, "How about learning everything step by step?" Hearing this, the girl objects, claiming he knows she's capable of anything. Lucas says the Archduke is more demanding of his work than anyone else. He then reveals that he didn't mean to tell her this, but she ultimately passed the tests, and he doesn't think it's hard to say she passed them perfectly, having completed the entire process. At this point, the protagonist realized she felt she had passed the tests not because of her abilities, but simply because she was lucky. Because, to the Archduke and Lucas, who knew nothing about the Czech, they couldn't even imagine that she had solved the problem based on the knowledge and experience she had gained in her past life. The main character seems annoyed because she can't tell the truth. She says she's Danae. Theon pats the girl on the head and says she's embarrassing her brother. The girl asks why he didn't knock. The boy replies that she must have missed him while she was crying. He then says that for the future Archduchess, who has no experience, no manners, let alone any sense of self-discipline, he's brought just the right job, and invites her to take a look. Danae read the leaf and says, "It's an imperial party." Theon explains that since she's the official successor, she needs to show off her skills in high society, and this is the place where she can also show off her dancing skills. The main character says that she will definitely go. Kana approaches His Excellency and informs him that she abandoned her family to protect the young lady. The girl says she doesn't know if they believe her words, as all the relatives in the collateral line wanted Lucas to succeed her. The Marchioness announced that she had a different opinion, and that no matter what anyone said, the true successor was the young Lady Danae, and to prove her loyalty, she had to act in this manner. The Archduke asks why she wants reciprocity for her actions, and asks what she desires. Kana replies that she does. At this time, Theon took Danae to the hairdresser. When the girl got her hair done, he said that the hairdresser had curled her hair too much and suggested letting it down a little. At this point, the main character realized that her butt was numb, as it was already past 2 o'clock. This reminded her of the nightmare Shize had the first time he bought her dresses. Kana, who had been her savior in that kidnapping incident as a reward for betraying her father, and now had nowhere to hide, put Priscilla from the Archduke, just as now she had nowhere to stay in the annex of the Winter Mansion. But the Archduke was very worried and persuaded the Kana to live elsewhere, not in the annex. This was another Azan mansion on the outskirts of the capital. Mr. Azanoff understands that, in any case, since she saved her granddaughter once, she naturally had some expectations, and so he saw a suitable place for her and decided to end things quietly. However, the Azan family was visiting the capital for the first time in 7 years, and the road there was limited. They had to drop Kana off along the way, and at that moment, the main character thought that all she could do was be polite. For that reason, when Danae found herself in the capital, she had no choice but to be with Kana. Theon asks why he's sighing. Shise replies that he's worried about Lucas, who remains in the Winter Mansion. The boy says there's nothing he can do, as it's the will of the great mage Pamela, and it's unknown how long they'll remain here. So he believes the mansion can't be left empty for long. The brother says that he also knows that the Winter Mansion must be firmly protected, and that the mission and traditions of the family, which have been preserved for 500 years, cannot be violated. The young man says that His Highness Kirun personally sent an invitation to the Archduke. He even signed an attendance agreement, and now it's impossible to undo it. Theon announces that he absolutely must be present at this location, as he must see the results of his dance training. The young man tells the lady that he came here as her assistant and bodyguard because the old man asked him to. Lucas says the Archduke was dissatisfied with several knights. Danae screams, saying that grandfather has gone too far. He has promptly removed Hedin from her security detail. The guard informs her that, unfortunately, something similar happened the first time he brought her to the mansion, and so the old man won't forgive her for doing it twice. Then he asks if she's not glad to have a new knight accompanying her. Nasledoshi Danae suggests looking at this letter, as the princess has sent an invitation to tea. The twins are surprised to hear this, and she asks what their reaction is. Theon suggests the little girl throw it away right now, a Yivo. His brother suggests burning it. The girl asks, surprised, why? Shise asks if she wants to step on the same rake as Lucas. The young lady doesn't understand what that means and asks about it. Theon explains that the princess fell in love with Lucas at a party, and she simply doesn't know how many years the princess had been following her brother around. Shise became determined to find anything to harm Lucas, and he doesn't understand why people like that are the ones who pick on his brother. At this point, the main character was thinking about how difficult it is to be popular. Then she says that, nevertheless, this letter was personally sent by the princess. The girl says that if she gladly accepts this offer and maintains good relations with the imperial family, she asks whether this will not tarnish the reputation of the successor to the archduchy. Theon tells the little girl she has great ambitions and asks if she plans to make a lasting mark on the capital, and on her first visit no less. The girl replies that she just wants to go to a party and asks why she's jumping to that conclusion. At this point, the protagonist was thinking that he was a scary guy who had completely exposed her plan. Danae said that she wanted her grandfather to want to see her again because she believed he was giving her a task like how many candles to buy this year. The girl says that this isn't the important job the Archduke's successor should be doing. Then she says she wants to be recognized as a grandfather and do a normal job. Danae thought that if everything went wrong, her plan for revenge would turn into sea foam. Shise grabs her brother by the jacket and says that these are Brother Lucas's words and therefore suggests that he listen carefully. Before leaving, Lucas said that Dana feels resentment for being the successor and being given only minor things to do, and he thinks that maybe it's because of past mistreatment, and that's why he's worried because she has low self-esteem. Lucas says he feels she's trying to prove herself by any means necessary, and the current Danae is already good enough. So, if possible, in the capital, let them do whatever she wants. The elder brother says that he will talk to the Archduke so that he will be close by and therefore do a favor to the Shise. Danae looks at the twins and asks what's wrong with them. Theon says that Ella is certainly stubborn, but her fighting prowess is relatively weak. Shise supports her brother and says he's right. Since Lucas held out, Danae will be fine. Hearing this, the main character, crying out, says that since everything has been decided, she will gladly attend. Then she tells Marina to send an urgent message right now. The twins say that in exchange, They will go too. On the day of the tea party, the girl realized this was more than she had imagined, and she realized this was an atmosphere where men were not allowed. So the twins were asked to wait in another room. The pink-haired princess asks the girl if she's Danae. The main character realizes this is Princess Ella, and she believes it's time to show her the results of Shisei's special training. The girl replies that she is Danae from the Archduchy of Asanov and thanks her for the honor of inviting her to this place. The princess, hearing this, says she's honored to hear gratitude from the Asanov family, believing the family is famous for not responding to invitations. She asks if she's had any luck this time. Emma tells the girl to sit down. At this point, the main character smiled and thought about how she sensed this would be a fun tea party, and she realized that this was her first test as the successor to the Archduchy. The little girl thought that she was interested in seeing who would beat whom. Princess Ella was at a loss, as this was completely different from what she had heard. They said she was the Archduke's granddaughter, picked up in the slums, and she thought some simpleton would come. However, Danae proved herself to be top-notch. She says she thinks these are the most delicious chocolate chip cookies she's ever eaten. At this point, the princess doesn't understand why Danae is so beautiful. She thinks her gestures are elegant for someone who, until recently, was only a commoner. And besides, even her taste in clothes can't be criticized. She can't fathom where she bought such clothes. Emma remembers that Lucas Asanov, who dared to leave her, had a bright smile on his face. And that's why she wants to show the whole world the true face of his little sister. Danae asks if there's something stuck to her face. The princess objects and says nothing. Then she explains that, of course, the sweets are delicious, as they're made by the Empire's finest pastry chefs. And the tea is also brewed from special tea leaves that grow only in the south. The princess said the taste might be a bit unfamiliar to northerners. And then she thought about how she was a humble northern simpleton who had never drunk so much luxurious tea. Danae says she can't stand it. Hearing this, Her Majesty thinks she's understood the meaning of her words and is angry. Then she falls silent and thinks about exploding, because she really wants to see it. The guest says she truly doesn't think she can contain her deepest gratitude any longer. Then she thanks the mistress for treating her to such precious tea, as she believes the princess has a heart as kind as her appearance. Hearing this, the princess cries out and asks if she's beautiful and kind. Then she explains that she's exaggerating just because of some tea. She adds that there's plenty of that kind of tea in the palace, and that she only offered it to her at this tea party because she was afraid it might be thrown away. The girl says that the princess, who could have thrown it all away without any regrets, specially prepared it for tea. And then she says that Her Majesty is like an angel. Hearing these words, Emma says it's natural, since the more a person has, the more they should share. She asserts that the Karun imperial family achieved prosperity through love and abundance, and she is simply following their traditions. Danae objects, saying that no matter how much she has, it's hard to share with others. She asks if this isn't possible, because the princess is a generous person. The girl says that she is like a goddess who gave strength to the hero of their family, Asanov Pamela. At this point, the princess realized that this was the little girl, the younger sister of Lucas Asanov, who had abandoned her. She said that if she wanted, she could take the tea leaves with her when she left. Danae said it was a great honor for her. Hearing this, the other ladies thought it was impossible for Princess Ella to give gifts to anyone. Meanwhile, the twins are in the waiting room. Shisei asks what kind of cake is on the table. Her brother replies that a servant left it. Dion asks why the hell they brought fucking sweets to where the two guys are sitting. The brother says that, as expected, his taste hasn't changed. And seeing him devour sweets when he's around Danae, he thought his taste had changed. And then he asks if he wants her to like him that much. Shisei informs him that he's no better. Then he asks if he thinks he doesn't know why he caused such a fuss and volunteered to come here. He says that if something happens to the Archduke's prized successor, it would likely greatly anger the Archduke and lead to disaster. The guy says that there was a kidnapping incident not long ago and believes that the more guards, the better. Theon looked out the window, curious about the boy near the guards. Shisei said it was Second Prince Roaz, and he didn't understand why he needed a bow. The boy suggested that perhaps he was preparing to hunt, yet his body was still skinny. Shisei says that with such a body, he won't be able to maintain his balance when shooting a bow, and he believes it would be a big deal if he staggered and hit a person. Meanwhile, at the Asanov mansion in the capital, Marina asks the lady what these boxes are. She replies that they are tea leaves given to her by Princess Ella. She said to take them all, because they would have been thrown away anyway. Danae reports that this is said to be a tea called Falania, and that it has a fine aroma and flavor, Upon hearing this, the servant is surprised and asks if these are the famous high-quality tea leaves. Marina asks what happened at the palace. Theon says the little one seems to have appeased the princess well, as she has a ton of gifts. Danae asks what he's talking about. Then she explains that, other than being pretty, she's just an ordinary girl, without any fighting prowess. The guy says that if you look closely, she can also say harsh things with a carefree face. The girl says she almost forgot while they were talking that she'll be going to the courtyard the day after tomorrow. After all, Princess Ella invited her on a boat ride, and this time, she told her to come alone. On the day of her meeting with Princess Ella, the main character thought about how she would be riding a boat for the first time in her life, and more importantly, that she would be able to eat delicious sweets again. As I promised, the princess sent a luxurious carriage and an imperial palace escort to fetch the girl. The girl realized there were more escorts than she thought. The main character recalls a conversation that came up at a previous tea party. The princess wondered if her older brothers were being overprotective of her, and she believes that, no matter how much they worry about their little sister, she still thinks it's too much. Danae asked the princess for forgiveness and said that, nevertheless, she was glad that she did not kick them out, but allowed them to stay inside the palace. The princess, crying out, asks if she ever thought she'd kick them out for something like that. Then she assures him she's not so stingy as to do such a thing, and she can even see how much love she receives from such brothers. The girl says she's also jealous because she has no brothers. The princess says she has 3 handsome brothers, which means she saved an entire country in her past life. The main character says Princess Ella has 2 brothers, and Prince Rose is rightly nicknamed the Noble Lily. The princess says, more importantly, that they're planning a boat ride the day after tomorrow, and asks her how she likes the idea. Emma says it's hard to make friends with people like them in the north. She thinks such a good opportunity won't come again. Meanwhile, the main character wonders what they think of the north in general. Her Majesty says that she will send a carriage and attendants that day, and therefore believes that this time the girl can come alone. Today, as promised, the princess arrived with a carriage and a knightly contingent. Marina said she must be glad to have friends her own age, but she didn't understand anything at all. The young lady reflected on how she was so overwhelmed by the new encounters she hadn't had in her past life that she was feeling dizzy. The girl remembers that she's never left the Misty Mountain, so everything here is new to her. Consequently, she's a little anxious, but she reassures herself that this time, somehow, everything will work out. Shisei turns to the little girl and tells her to stand still. The girl says she said he doesn't have to come in, but rather see her out and ask why he came. Then she asks what will happen if this reaches the princess's ears. Then, with a cry, she tells him not to worry. The brother puts a ring on the girl's hand. She asks in surprise what it is. Shisei, objaśnię, that it suits today's dress very well. And then I hug the girl and whisper in her ear that he put protective magic on the ring. The brother tells her not to take off this ring under any circumstances and asks if she understands this. At this time, the main character thought that this was the same 3rd son of the Azonoff family, from whom not even a drop of blood would flow from the wound. Meanwhile, the imperial family's entourage witnesses only the touching scene, unsuspecting. They think he cares for his younger sister so much, something rarely seen in real life. The guard says they'll contact him as soon as they arrive and tells him not to worry. He says the girl is safe, as they'll take her to the imperial family's villa. Sitting in the carriage, the main character thought that her head was spinning, and from Togo, how real this horror was. The maid informs the guest that the mistress has only just woken up. She's very sorry for arriving so early. The butler says the princess was so eager to meet Lady Danae that she could barely sleep. Hearing this, the young lady was surprised, because the princess had been waiting to meet her and seemed to like her very much. The butler says that if the mistress doesn't mind, she could wait until Ella finishes her business. He also asks if she would like to stay in the guest room with the other ladies. Dana asks if she can go for a walk alone then. Then she explains that the last time she was invited, she never got to see the stunning garden. The maid, jumping up, asks why she said alone. The young lady replies that this is the land of the Kirin imperial family, as Atem asks if this is not the safest place in the empire. The grandfather says he knows this might be a concern, but assures her there's no need to worry about her. The butler says that if she's so sure of this, she shouldn't stray too far. The young lady thanks him for his concern. Danae thought that the palace was different after all, and the garden here was very large. She looked and saw that there was a lake too. She remembered that in her past life, the weather had never been so clear. In the Misty Mountains, where the little girl lived, true to her name, it was always foggy. Mr. Ryan said the only thing he liked there was the taste of the air. At the time, the girl remembered that she had learned nothing about the master after the excavations. Suddenly, the girl doesn't understand why her heart is beating so wildly. She remembers her brother and thinks he's overprotective of her. He even put a ring on her, one with protective magic. The young lady thought there was someone near her. And then suddenly, an arrow flew out of nowhere, and the girl managed to dodge it. The boy asks the main character who she is. Danae doesn't understand who this angel-looking child is aiming at her. Suddenly, the guy steps into the swamp and falls. The girl, screaming, asks if he's okay. And then she thinks he's some kind of dangerous guy, and even she feels uneasy. Danae offers the boy her hand, but he protests, saying it's not worth it. At that moment, she thought about how men usually do this, and so she believes she might have hurt his pride. The main character asks for forgiveness, and then says that she is from the Asimov family, and her name is Denia. The boy says the Asimovs are descendants of the hero Pamela, and he heard that purple eyes are proof of their descent, and he thinks she's the one Ella was talking about. The prince apologizes for the late introduction, and then reveals that he is Roaz, the second principal of the Kirin Empire. The young lady, crying out, calls him the noble Lily. He asks, surprised, where she heard that nickname. At that moment, she thought about the prince's very innocent reaction, and now she understands why there was such a fuss among the other ladies. Danae asks why he shot her. His Highness apologizes, then asks if he hurt her. The girl replies that she is fine, and at that moment, she thought that if it were not for the skills she acquired in her previous life, she would have died long ago. Roaz explains that he's actually preparing for a hunting festival, and because he doesn't have his brother's strength, he kept making mistakes. He then apologizes and asks if it might be because of his arrow ornament on his hat. He needs to fix it. The prince touched her hat, and then something pushed him, causing him to fall. The girl realized that the reason for this was the protective ring her brother had cast a spell on. Roaz fell into the water, and the girl quickly went to save him. He lost consciousness due to the shock of the fall. The main character, however, believes they need to get him out of the water quickly. The young lady doesn't understand what kind of lake this is, as her legs are pulled downwards, and even the flow of the water seems strange to her. She believes that if this continues, they will both drown. Then, with the help of the master's necklace, she escapes. Danae doesn't understand how this happened. At some point, the master's necklace began to glow, and she doesn't understand what it was. Before that, she hadn't even known what color it was. The girl took the necklace in her hand and wondered if the gray necklace had really returned to its original blue hue. The prince started coughing, and the girl asked if he had come to his senses. He asked what that splash of water was. The guards said they could already see the prince. The servants also ran toward them. At this point, the main character thought she was lost, as people flocked to them. The butler says they called a doctor quickly and brought 2 blankets. The princess asks if Lady Danae was here. She also wonders how this even happened. The heroine thought that if anyone saw this, they would immediately assume she had put the prince in danger, and she realized that the imperial family would not sit idly by. The girl became scared because she didn't know what to do in such a situation. The maid reports that the knight's commander, the attending physician, has arrived. Danae realizes she has put the prince in danger and considers this a disaster, but she can't understand how to justify it. The main character wonders if this matter will be resolved with excuses, since the fact is that the ring that Shisei gave her blew away the prince. The doctor asks the prince how this happened, Atagja, and also asks Lady Danae what this situation is. The girl believes that she needs to be honest and say that the ring is actually hers, but suddenly the prince, crying out, apologizes, and then explains that things took this turn entirely through his fault. The maid says that she will prepare a room for Lady Danae, and there she can change clothes and have a snack. The prince says that when he lost his balance and fell into the lake, Lady Danae saved him, and so she simply said nothing out of respect for him, and he considers this girl a benefactor for helping him. The doctor says the prince is especially eloquent today and is glad he's okay. Then he announces that the 2 of them should first change their clothes and order the rooms prepared quickly. Rose turns to Lady Danae and asks her to forget about the arrow incident. At this point, the protagonist thought that, to be more precise, all this commotion was caused by the prince's arrow. Well, thanks to him, she was saved. The girl realizes that the master's necklace, having fallen into the lake, began to glow. An unknown force had pushed them out of the water, and the necklace had regained its lost color. She doesn't understand what happened. That night, at the Asifon mansion in the capital, Shisei asks the girl if she's a fool. He also asks if the little girl thinks it's a good thing she fell into the lake with Prince Roaz. Her brother, screaming, asks if that boy was really bothering her. She replies that he's either angry or worried, and so he has to choose one. Then she insists that the circumstances he caused are more important. Shisei asks what he has to do with it. The girl explains that it's all because of the ring he gave her. She then explains that it happened because of his protective magic. She asks if it's not his fault, then whose else is it? The guy asks if the protective magic was activated. Then he asks if that means the boy really did hurt her. The girl insists that didn't happen. The Archduke enters the room and asks what all the noise is about. Theon replies that he did nothing and points at his brother. Then he says that he was bullying the little girl. Shisei claims he didn't hurt anyone. Danae explains that it was the result of overprotection, and believes that if Shisei hadn't worn the ring, this wouldn't have happened. The boy explains that he gave Danae a ring with protective magic. He was worried about her because she was going to the palace alone. Theon asks if everything exceeded his expectations, and thinks he overdid it. Hearing this, his brother punches him in the face. The boy, surprised, asks what kind of dangerous behavior he's been up to and explains that he almost died. Shisei, you suggest that he remember that it was thanks to him that Danae returned safe and sound. The girl says it's Prince Rose, the injured one. Grandfather asks what the second prince did to her. She assures him that it's true. Nothing special happened. Danae explains that the prince was trying to adjust the decoration on his hat, and Shisei's ring knocked it away. To cover for her, the prince concealed the truth. The Archduke says he now understands why the urgent letter arrived. He explains that a huge letter of apology recently arrived. He came to check what was going on, and now everything is clear to him. Grandfather says that there are words of gratitude written there for Danae, who helped the prince. Shisei asks what's more important, whether he came here just to check it out. The Archduke says he has a more important point, then shows him a gift box. The girl asks what it is, and the grandfather offers to open it for her. Danae saw a dress so luxurious and beautiful. The gentleman said there wasn't much time left before the imperial family's party. He was glad they'd finished it ahead of time and suggested she wear it to the party. The main character, thanking you, grandfather, says that this is the best gift, and then tells Marina to go into the room and measure it. The Archduke says it was a bit over the top, but nevertheless, he thinks it's an excellent idea and suggests being more prudent next time. At this time, Shisei thought that he had not received praise from the Archduke for a long time. A few days later, Marina informs her mistress that this was recently delivered. A man from the imperial palace asked her to give it to her, and she has no idea what it is. When the girl opened the box, she saw a beautiful dress and shoes. She also read a card that said she apologized for the previous incident and was sending this as an apology for ruining Prince Rose's dress. Danae thought he must have been very worried, since he'd even sent the dress. And he believed that even if it had happened, the incident with the prince's arrow had thrown off Shisei's ring. He believed he shouldn't have been so worried about it. Marina says it's true. It's a very beautiful dress, and she thought it would be just right to wear to the party. The girl says she's right, and then asks if she shouldn't go to the party at the imperial palace wearing the dress her grandfather gave her. The maid says it's best that way, as she believes she'll have another chance to wear the gift. The young mistress asks if she can hang it in her room. Shisei tells the girl to take the dress and throw it away. She doesn't understand how anyone can throw away a dress she received as a gift and asks about it. And at that moment, I thought about how strange my reaction was. The boy asks, what if the emperor decides to bind her to Roaz, and also wonders if she can handle it? He then explains that he knew this would happen, and that's why he was worried. Danae asks her brother if he's worrying too much and exaggerating. She insists that Prince Roaz is just a friend, and that he sent the dress only as an apology. Shisei is certain he has other intentions. The girl asks how he knows this. He replies that the time the dress was sent is proof of that. Since the imperial family's party is just around the corner, it's immediately obvious that the dress was sent specifically for the party. Hearing this, the main character understood why Marina had reacted so surprised. She asks if it's too much to associate this gesture with romance. Shisei asks if she doesn't know, then claims the teacher should have said so. She asks what exactly. The boy replies that only Roaz has a different mother, and since his mother is of low status, Roaz was excluded from the throne from the very beginning. Danae says she's never heard of this before. Brother says it's no secret among the nobility. Therefore, he must either attain a proper status and live in some village, or become the son-in-law of a prestigious family, and he believes this is the best future for Roaz. The girl recalls that as soon as the conversation about the prince began, the princess immediately told everyone to be quiet and not to mention Brother Roaz in such a place. The main character believes that Ella's reaction at the tea party is somehow connected to these conversations. Shisa tells little one to listen carefully and tells her that if she continues to see Roaz like this, she will become a victim of the imperial family's plan. Denai heard this and thought that she would never have imagined such a secret about the prince's birth, and that he bore no resemblance to the princess. The young lady reflected on how different the Asanov family was. She understood that not all members were blood relatives, but they were all treated as high-ranking nobles. The girl recalls Marina's words about how, until she arrived at the mansion, the place was, as the name suggests, gloomy as winter. Suddenly, Theon opens the door and addresses the little girl. She says he could have knocked. The brother explains that he heard a confectioner from the capital recently sent a bunch of chocolate cookies and wishes the successor to the Archduchy good luck in the future. The main character thinks it's already noisy here with just Baratheon, and she thinks he certainly wouldn't have been so quiet before. And she doesn't understand why the mansion was called gloomy. Theon asks the girl what's wrong. She says that, looking at him from the outside, one can tell he's quite handsome. The guy, surprised, asks why a friend. Denaya says he's tall, fit, and handsome. She even thinks his hair texture is good. The main character asks if she's jealous because she has black hair. Then she says that when she first saw it, she immediately realized how such an irritatingly beautiful blonde could be. The guy picks the girl up and tells her to stop talking nonsense and suggests they hurry down and eat some cookies. The girl, screaming, asks why he's grabbing her so abruptly, because he thinks it might spill the tea. On the day of the Imperial Palace party, Kana asks the mistress if she can ride in the carriage with her. Hearing this, the main character thought it was impudent. She even forgot they were staying in the same place. The lady asks if they've sent an invitation for Lady Kana too. She replies that they have, and she probably doesn't know, but the Asanov family's relatives are also receiving an invitation. The boy asks his sister why she's standing there instead of getting into the carriage. He asks where that fool is. The girl replies that if he's talking about Theon, he said he'd rather ride a horse and raced off after his grandfather's carriage. Shisa says what he expected. He then says they should move quickly. Kana asks him if she can come with them. Then she explains that if this is the carriage Lord Shisa is getting into, it seems she needs his permission. Hearing this, the main character thought that if Shisa allowed it, then she, traveling with him, would be of no importance. And she thinks that she seems to have decided that the permission of the superficial future Archduchess is not so necessary. She thinks she's a fox. The young man turns to Danae and says she's asking permission to give her relatives a ride in their carriage. She's the one who decides. As the successor to the Asanov family, he wonders what the future Archduchess will do. Danae turns to Lady Kana and informs her that she must take another carriage. Then she reminds her that she has a small carriage, the one she arrived in, and therefore thinks it will be quite sufficient. Kana was surprised to hear this, but then thanked him for his concern. She said she hoped the road would be as smooth as it had been when she arrived. Sitting in the carriage, the girl thought about her harsh response and wondered if everything would be okay. The protagonist realized that Kana was from the Oset family who had been targeting her, and she didn't know if this would cause even more problems in the future. Shisei asks the young lady where she learned this. She replies that she didn't learn anything, but simply repeated after him. The guy says she got through, albeit barely, but with a lot of effort. Then he claims that if she wanted to impress him, she should have ignored her and just hit the road. Shisei says that although her character can be said to have done quite well, finally, the main character reached the place everyone had been waiting for. It was the famous gathering place of the nobles. Denaya Viskrikavaya says she's never seen such a big chocolate cake since she was born, and that's why she wants to try it right now. Her brother asks the little one if she's going to eat all the chocolate in the capital. He suggests she eat chocolate for all 3 meals. The girl asks what's wrong with Togo, since she thinks that since they came, it's better to have fun. Suddenly, the main character became interested in where her grandfather had gone, since he had been there and then disappeared. Denai saw many young girls gathered around the Archduke, and she thought he was incredibly popular. She also wondered if everything would be all right with her grandfather. Theon says that this is the first time he's appeared in 7 years, and he understands that, of course, people will react that way. Shiseka Varit in any case, he thinks the old man now has a displeased expression, since his Araura is felt even near them. And judging by the atmosphere, he doesn't think the gentleman will ever give preference to social circles. The protagonist saw that the young representatives of Asanov were not being ignored, and the same queue formed towards them. At that moment, the twins felt as if a swarm of bees had gathered around them, and the girl thought that she knew Shisei was so popular, but she hadn't realized Baratheon was as well. Danae looked at the twins and thought about how similar their faces were. And since we were talking about a tournament, that meant Theon had been to some competition and achieved fame there. The young lady thought about how she felt sick and nauseous when she was in crowded places. Because the air was warm and mingled with the strong scent of perfume, she felt like she was going to vomit. Theon apologized and then asked if they could please go their separate ways. He explained that their little sister needed to rest. Shisei asked the little girl what was wrong and where it hurt. The Marquise reports that the terrace on the other side is free. Theon thanks the lady. Danae says she didn't know he could express gratitude. He asks who she takes him for. After this, the aristocrats began gossiping about how she was found in the slums. They believed that perhaps she, like her brothers, was taken in out of pity, and they speculate that the Archduke has a hobby of collecting unfortunate people. At this point, the main character thought that everything they said with their mouths was perfectly audible, as if she were a person whose hearing had improved thanks to training from a past life. The guy asks if she's feeling unwell. Danae reflects on how disgusting it is that nobles are considered cowardly people who can't say anything to someone's face, but rather whisper behind their backs. And she realizes that perhaps she picked up this from the master, since she simply can't bear these conversations. The main character recalls Lucas's conversation, a tom about how, when demons appeared in the northern part, several places were completely destroyed, including the village where he lived, and she believes the twins probably share a similar past. The young lady believes that everything is so good now because they live in an archduchy, and no one is pitiful. Danae touches the twins' heads. Shisei says she'll ruin his hair. The girl looks startled, then apologizes, and then she thinks something might have happened and he was just afraid his hair would get tangled. Theon asks why she's suddenly patting them on the head. She replies that she simply heard that they both work hard. The girl thought that her condition had improved, and then, crying out, asked if maybe they should quietly go and eat some chocolate cake. The guy says the little girl seems determined, and judging by the fact she wants cake, she's obviously recovered. And it was Danae who had once again forgotten her plan. When the ladies learned she was an archduchess, they offered her some cake. They also asked how Mr. Shisei was usually doing and what the secret of his beauty was. The ladies wanted her to tell them all. Hearing this, the main character wondered whether this was a banquet or an interrogation room. The girl looked at the surprised looks and thought about how amazing noble society was, and how rumors spread like wildfire. And that meant the Asanov family could receive more than just praise. The young lady wondered why they didn't know all the details and weren't saying everything. She understood that everyone was free to express their opinion, but she didn't understand why it was inhuman to laugh at someone else's misfortune. Shisei approaches the girl and asks how long she plans to eat. He also asks what she was looking at. The guy realized that it was gossip, and then said that there was no need to pay attention, because such people are everywhere. Shisei considers it more important that it's time for a meal. He asks what they think of the Asanov family. Danae claims that if he saw everything, he should have helped her. The girl says she's so angry that they only ask about him and his brother, and she has to answer everything. The guy explains that the role of a receiver is to handle such situations well, and it's in the veterinary circles that she can learn this. The girl says that if he cares so much about the Asanov family's honor, then, as the older brother, he should have been the first to offer a helping hand. Hearing this, the boy suggests she watch what she says, and then asks if she knows how many times. Shisei says fine, all that needs to be done is to restore honor. The young lady asks how he intends to restore honor. The guy replies that if she ate, she needs to exercise a little. She says she doesn't know what he's talking about. He says she'll find out soon and suggests she confide in him. Dana screams, asking what he's doing so suddenly. Shisei asks if she's holding on well. The girl asks why he's pulling her so abruptly and insists she's only holding on thanks to her wits. At this time, the ladies were watching the young gentleman, and they looked with admiration and thought that he looked luxurious. Shisei tells the girl that she has a surprisingly wonderful teacher. He wants to meet him once. She replies that he's handsome, but not very personable, and that he simply catches people like mice and teaches them. Danae says she'd like to praise herself for enduring all of this. Hearing this, the guy reminds her that he told her to watch her words. The girl gets angry and steps on his shoes. Then, screaming, he asks why he stepped on her. He picks her up and starts dancing with her again. The main character asks him, surprised, what he's doing. At this point, Shisei laughs. She asks if now is the time for Togo to laugh. Then she asks if he knows how scared she is. The guy says that despite all this, she dances well. Denaya explains that it's because she put all her effort into it, and she says she won't get bored with him. The girl asks Theon if he noticed how she danced. He replies that he saw everything perfectly and considers it a work of art. The butler announces that His Majesty the Emperor and the entire imperial family are entering. Shisa says the time has finally come and tells the little girl not to even look at the second prince. Hearing this, the girl becomes angry and repeats that she has stopped talking like that. Then she asks who is next to her grandfather. Denaya saw Canu with her grandfather, and she put on the dress Prince Rose had given her. The protagonist realizes that this woman was in her room. The girl thought that perhaps the prince would misunderstand if he saw that she had given the dress he had given her to someone else. And she realized that if that were true, it couldn't be worse than rudeness. Theon asks the little girl what's wrong, as he thinks her soul is half gone. Shiz says the Archduke has called them and suggests they go. At this point, the girl is at a loss as to what to do, as she doesn't want the prince to see. The girl doesn't want to leave him with a bad impression anymore. She thinks it would be better if she caught the flu and didn't come here. Suddenly, the girl saw Prince Roaz in front of her.